Sold for $60 and a sack of grain. The snow fell silent as death the day Emma Hale learned her worth. $60. That's what her uncle accepted from the stranger with ice in his beard and desperation in his eyes. No preacher, no promises, just money pressed into calloused hands and a girl shoved toward a wagon she'd never seen before. Nathan Cole didn't ask her name until they were 5 miles from town, and by then Emma understood the truth that would haunt their first frozen months together. She wasn't bought to be loved. She was bought to survive. Welcome to a story of redemption forged in the unforgiving cold of the Wyoming frontier. If this story moves you, please hit that like button and comment with your city below. I'd love to see how far Emma's journey travels across the world. Now, let's begin. The transaction happened on the porch of Miller's General Store, where the December wind cut through Emma's threadbare shawl like 1,000 tiny knives. She stood 3 steps behind her uncle, close enough to hear every word, far enough to pretend she wasn't the subject of negotiation. "She's 18, healthy, can read some," Uncle George said, his breath clouding in the bitter air. "Decent cook when she puts her mind to it. No complaints about work." The man studying her, tall, broad-shouldered, somewhere past 30 with lines carved deep around his eyes, said nothing at first. He looked at Emma the way someone might assess a horse at auction, checking for soundness rather than spirit. His dark hair needed cutting, his coat needed mending, and his face needed something Emma couldn't name. Something human that seemed to have frozen over, same as the creek behind the store. "I need help with my children," he said finally, his voice rough from disuse. "3 of them. Ranch work too. Cooking, cleaning, mending. It's hard living out there." "She can handle hard living," Uncle George assured him. Eager now. Too eager. "Been doing it since her mama passed." "What was that, Emma? 6 years now?" 7, Emma whispered, though neither man acknowledged she'd spoken. "I can pay $60, the stranger said, "plus a sack of grain for your trouble. I need an answer today. I've got children waiting and winter pressing in." Uncle George's eyes lit with the kind of brightness that came from unexpected fortune. Emma felt something cold settle in her chest that had nothing to do with the weather. "You want to marry her proper?" her uncle asked, though his tone suggested the answer didn't much matter. "I'm proposing an arrangement," the man replied carefully. "She'd have a roof, food, a place. I'd have help raising my children. If it works out over time, we could formalize it legal. If it doesn't—" He paused, his gray eyes finally meeting Emma's directly for the first time. "Then we'd figure something else." The words hung in the frozen air between them, honest in their bleakness. "Deal," Uncle George said, extending his hand before Emma could speak. "When do you want her?" "Now." It happened that fast. Money changed hands. Emma watched the bills disappear into her uncle's coat pocket, watched him weigh the grain sack with satisfaction. She'd lived in his house since her mother's death, worked his kitchen, scrubbed his floors, tolerated his wife's sharp tongue and sharper hand, and now she was being passed along like an unwanted piece of furniture, sold to fill a gap in a stranger's household. "Get your things," Uncle George told her, already turning away. "Don't keep Mr. Cole waiting." Emma climbed the stairs to the tiny room she'd occupied for 7 years, her hands shaking as she gathered her few possessions. 2 dresses besides the one she wore, both faded and patched. Her mother's brush, the bristles worn soft. A small Bible with her parents' names inscribed inside. A bundle of letters her father had sent her mother during their brief courtship. Emma had read them so many times the paper was thin as tissue. She wrapped everything in her extra shawl, tied the corners tight, and descended the stairs for the last time. Her aunt waited at the bottom, arms crossed over her broad chest. "Don't expect to come crawling back when this doesn't work out," she said, her voice sharp as January wind. "You made your bed the day you were born, a burden on decent people. Maybe now you'll earn your keep proper." Emma had learned long ago that silence was safer than defense. She moved past her aunt without response, stepped onto the porch where Nathan Cole waited beside a weathered wagon hitched to 2 sturdy horses. "That all you have?" he asked, nodding toward her small bundle. "Yes, sir." He took it from her hands, not roughly, but not gently either, and placed it in the wagon bed beneath a canvas tarp. Then he offered his hand to help her onto the seat. Emma hesitated, meeting his eyes again. They were gray as winter sky, revealing nothing. She took his hand. His palm was rough with calluses, his grip steady. He released her the moment she was settled, then climbed up beside her and gathered the reins. Uncle George appeared in the doorway, the grain sack already inside. He didn't wave goodbye. Neither did Emma's aunt. The door simply closed, and Nathan clicked his tongue to the horses. The wagon lurched forward into the snow. They rode in silence through the town Emma had known all her life, past the church where her parents had married, past the schoolhouse where she'd learned her letters from a patient teacher who'd since moved east, past the cemetery where her mother rested beneath a simple wooden cross. Emma didn't look at any of it. She kept her eyes forward on the endless white expanse of the Wyoming plains stretching before them. 5 miles passed before Nathan spoke. "What's your name?" Emma turned to him, startled. "Emma Halesow." He nodded once, as if filing the information away. "I'm Nathan Cole. My place is about 3 hours northwest of town, assuming the snow doesn't get worse. We'll make it before dark." "Yes, sir." "My children," he continued, his voice careful, as though reciting facts helped maintain distance. "Lily is 12. She's been trying to manage the household since—" He paused. "Since their mother passed 2 years ago. She's competent, but she's still a child. Owen is 9. He's quiet, bookish when he can be. And Jacob is 6. He's—" Another pause. "He's 6. Emma waited, but Nathan offered nothing more about Jacob. Instead, he stared at the horizon, his jaw tight beneath his beard. "What happened to their mother?" Emma asked softly, then immediately regretted the question. It was too personal, too soon. But Nathan answered, his voice flat. "Fever. Took her in 4 days. We were snowed in, couldn't get to a doctor, just had to watch her." He stopped, his knuckles white on the reins. "That was February of 76. I'm sorry. World's full of sorry." His tone wasn't cruel, just worn down to nothing. "Doesn't change what is." They fell back into silence, the only sounds the creak of wagon wheels, the steady clip of hooves, and the whisper of wind through endless snow. Emma pulled her shawl tighter and tucked her hands beneath her arms, but the cold seemed to seep through fabric and flesh alike, settling deep in her bones. An hour into the journey, Nathan pulled a thick wool blanket from beneath the seat and handed it to her without comment. Emma wrapped it around her shoulders, grateful despite the awkwardness. The gesture seemed to cost him something, not the blanket itself, but the act of noticing she was cold, the breach of distance required to offer comfort. "Thank you," she whispered. He grunted in acknowledgement, his eyes never leaving the path ahead. The landscape grew more remote as they traveled, the few scattered homesteads giving way to untouched wilderness. Rolling hills covered in snow, clusters of pine and aspen bare-branched against gray sky, frozen creeks cutting through valleys like silver scars. It was beautiful in its desolation, Emma thought. Beautiful and utterly unforgiving. "You've done ranch work before?" Nathan asked suddenly. "Some. I helped my uncle with his property, fed the chickens, gathered eggs, tended the garden in summer, did most of the cooking and cleaning inside. This will be harder. We've got cattle, horses, sheep. The work doesn't stop because the weather's bad or you're tired. Can you handle a gun?" Emma blinked. "A gun?" "We've got wolves, occasionally mountain lions. I need to know if you can protect yourself and the children if I'm out with the herd." I can learn." Nathan glanced at her, really looked at her for the first time since they'd left town. Emma met his gaze steadily, refusing to appear weak even as fear twisted in her stomach. She saw something flicker in his expression, not warmth exactly, but a grim sort of approval. "You'll have to," he said simply, and turned back to the road. The sun was low on the horizon when they finally crested a ridge, and Emma saw Nathan Cole's ranch spread below them. It wasn't grand, just a sturdy log house with a stone chimney, a barn, and several outbuildings, corrals holding horses and cattle, all of it carved out of wilderness and held against winter's assault through sheer stubborn will. Smoke rose from the chimney, and as the wagon descended the slope, Emma saw a small figure appear in the doorway. A girl, thin and straight-backed, her dark hair pulled into a severe braid. "That's Lily," Nathan said quietly. "She'll be—" Cautious with you. Don't take it personal." The wagon rolled into the yard, and immediately 2 more children appeared behind their sister. A boy with Nathan's dark hair and serious expression, Owen, Emma guessed, and a smaller boy, maybe 6, with wide eyes and a wooden horse clutched in his hand. Jacob. Nathan brought the horses to a stop and set the brake. The 4 of them, father and 3 children, stared at each other across the snowy yard, and Emma felt the weight of their shared grief like a physical presence. These children had watched their mother die. They'd survived 2 years of winter and loss. And now Emma was here, a stranger bought with $60, expected to fill a space that could never truly be filled. Nathan climbed down from the wagon, then reached up to help Emma. Her legs were stiff from the cold and the long ride, and she stumbled slightly. He steadied her with a hand on her elbow, then released her immediately. "Children," he said, his voice formal, "this is Emma Hale. She'll be living here now, helping with the household and tending to you. I expect you to show her respect and cooperation." Lily's dark eyes assessed Emma with an intensity that made her want to shrink back. The girl was 12 years old and already carrying the weight of a woman's responsibilities. Emma saw no welcome in that gaze, only wariness and something that might have been resentment. "Where will she sleep?" Lily asked, her voice cool and controlled. "The spare room off the kitchen," Nathan replied. "It's small, but it's warm from the stove. That's where Mama kept her preserves and sewing things." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Nathan's jaw tightened. "Your mother's been gone 2 years, Lily. We need the space." "Yes, sir." But the girl's expression didn't soften. Owen watched the exchange silently, his gray eyes, so like his father's, darting between Emma and his sister. Jacob had moved closer to Lily, half hiding behind her skirt, his wooden horse pressed to his chest like a shield. "Owen, help me with the horses," Nathan said, clearly eager to escape the tension. "Lily, show Emma the house and where things are. Emma, my daughter will explain your duties." He strode toward the barn without waiting for acknowledgement, and Owen followed after one last curious glance at Emma. That left her standing in the yard with Lily and Jacob, the wind picking up as evening approached. "Come on," Lily said finally, her tone neither kind nor cruel, just flat. "I'll show you." Emma followed the girl into the house, Jacob trailing behind them like a small, silent shadow. The interior was as sparse as she'd expected. Walls of rough-hewn logs, simple furniture built for durability rather than comfort, a massive stone fireplace providing the room's only warmth. But it was clean, meticulously so. Every surface scrubbed, every item in its place, the floor swept, the dishes stacked with military precision. This was Lily's doing, Emma realized. A 12-year-old girl maintaining order against chaos, structure against grief. Keeping her mother's house the way her mother would have wanted it, even though her mother would never see it again. "Kitchen's through here," Lily said, leading Emma into a larger room dominated by a black iron stove and a long wooden table. "We eat at 6. Papa doesn't like waiting. Owen eats quiet, but Jacob—" She paused, glancing at the small boy who hadn't spoken a word since Emma's arrival. "Jacob's particular about his food. He won't eat if things are mixed together. Everything has to be separate on his plate." Emma nodded, filing away the information. "I understand." "Your room." Lily pushed open a narrow door off the kitchen. Beyond it lay a small space, barely large enough for a bed and a chest of drawers. But true to Nathan's word, it was warm from the kitchen stove, and there was a window looking out toward the mountains. "Mama's things are still in the chest. Papa couldn't bear to—" She stopped, her young face suddenly looking ancient. "I'll help you move them tomorrow." "There's no rush," Emma said gently. "We can leave them where your mother wanted them." Lily's eyes snapped to Emma's face, searching for mockery or manipulation. Finding neither, she seemed to deflate slightly, as though she'd been braced for a fight that didn't come. "I'll show you where the linens are," she said after a moment, "and the flour and sugar and such. Papa expects biscuits with breakfast, and he likes his coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in. Owen will eat anything but he reads at the table if you let him, and Papa says that's poor manners. Jacob—" Again that pause, laden with something Emma couldn't identify. "Jacob might not talk to you for a while. He doesn't talk much to anyone anymore." Emma knelt down to Jacob's level, making herself small and non-threatening. The boy watched her with enormous blue eyes. the only one of the children who hadn't inherited Nathan's gray gaze. "Hello, Jacob," she said softly. "That's a fine horse you have there. Does he have a name?" Jacob's small hand tightened on the wooden toy, but he didn't answer, didn't move, just stared at Emma as though she were a puzzle he couldn't solve. "It's all right," Emma told him. "You don't have to talk to me until you're ready. I'm just glad to meet you." She rose slowly, catching Lily's expression, surprise, quickly masked. The girl had expected Emma to push, to demand response, to be offended by Jacob's silence. Instead, Emma simply smiled at the little boy and turned back to Lily. "Show me the rest?" For the next hour, Lily conducted a thorough tour of the household, explaining routines with the precision of a military commander. Wake at 5, stoke the fire, begin breakfast. Collect eggs from the hen house if the weather permitted. Water for washing heated on the stove. Laundry on Mondays, mending on Wednesdays, bread baking every 3 days. Owen's lessons in the afternoon, Lily had been teaching him from their mother's old primers. Jacob's bedtime at 7:30. No exceptions. Emma absorbed it all, asking occasional questions, offering no criticism or suggestion for change. She could feel Lily's defenses, high and thick as fortress walls. This child had been lady of the house for 2 years, had held her small family together through grief and harsh winters. She wouldn't surrender authority easily, and Emma had no intention of forcing her to. When Nathan and Owen returned from settling the horses, dinner was already in progress. Lily had started stew that morning, and she now ladled it into bowls with practiced efficiency. Emma set the table. Lily had shown her where the plates were kept, and sliced bread from a loaf that was 3 days old and growing stale. They sat in assigned places, Emma realized. Nathan at the head, Lily to his right, Owen to his left, and Jacob beside his sister. That left an empty chair at the foot of the table, the mother's place. Emma hesitated, then moved toward the empty seat. "Not there," Lily said sharply. Everyone froze. Nathan's eyes lifted to his daughter's face. "That was Mama's chair," Lily continued, her voice tight. Nobody sits there." Emma carefully set down the basket of bread and moved to stand against the wall instead. "I'll eat after you're finished," she said quietly. "I don't mind." "Sit down, Emma," Nathan said, his voice heavy. "Lily, she needs to eat with us. She's not a servant." "Then where?" Lily demanded, and for the first time Emma heard the child beneath the competent mask. "Where does she sit if not in Mama's place and not with the rest of us?" Nathan closed his eyes briefly, and Emma saw the exhaustion in every line of his face. He'd brought her here to solve problems, not create new ones. But grief didn't follow logic, and loss didn't respect convenience. "Owen," Emma said gently, "would you mind terribly if I sat next to you? That way Lily can stay where she's comfortable, and your mother's place can remain as it is." Owen blinked in surprise, then glanced at his father. Nathan gave a small nod. "I don't mind," Owen said, his voice soft. He scooted his chair over slightly to make room. Emma pulled another chair from against the wall and positioned it between Owen and the side of the table. Not quite part of the family circle, but no longer entirely separate. It was an awkward arrangement, but Lily's shoulders relaxed fractionally, and Jacob's grip on his wooden horse loosened. They ate in near silence. The stew was good, simple but well-seasoned, the meat tender from long cooking. Emma noticed that Jacob's portion was carefully separated, each component in its own section of the bowl. She noticed that Owen's eyes kept drifting to a book on the shelf beside the fireplace. She noticed that Lily ate with mechanical efficiency, fulfilling a function rather than taking pleasure. And she noticed that Nathan barely tasted his food, his mind clearly elsewhere, on things Emma couldn't fathom. When the meal ended, Lily and Emma cleared the dishes while Nathan supervised Jacob's washing up for bed. Owen disappeared into the small room he shared with his brother, returning with the book Emma had seen him eyeing. He sat near the fire, reading by lamplight, his serious face absorbed in whatever story he'd found. "I can do the dishes," Lily said as Emma began pumping water into a basin. "You don't know where things go yet." "Then teach me," Emma replied. "And tomorrow, I'll remember." They worked side by side in uncomfortable quiet, Lily washing, Emma drying and stacking according to whispered instructions. Through the open door, Emma could hear Nathan's low voice as he helped Jacob into his nightshirt, the murmur of father and son too soft to discern words but carrying tones of patience and practiced routine. When the dishes were finished and put away, Lily hung the damp towels with precision and turned to Emma. "I'll show you where the night clothes are kept. Papa said you didn't bring much." "That's kind of you." Lily led her back to the small room off the kitchen and opened the chest of drawers. Inside, carefully folded, were women's things, nightgowns and chemises, work dresses and aprons, all showing signs of careful mending and long wear. A life's worth of garments, waiting for someone who would never return. "Mama was taller than you," Lily said quietly, her hand resting on a white nightgown. "But these should work well enough until you can make your own." "Are you certain your father wants me to—" "He told me to give them to you," Lily interrupted. "He said Mama would have wanted them used, not left to moths in memory." She pulled out the nightgown and a warm flannel wrapper. "Here." Emma accepted the clothes, holding them carefully. They smelled faintly of lavender and something else, maybe hope, maybe love, maybe just the particular scent of a woman who'd lived and worked and died in this house. "Thank you," Emma said, "for everything today. I know this isn't easy." Lily's young face hardened. "Easy or not doesn't matter. It is what it is." She moved toward the door, then paused. "Papa's not cruel, and he provides well for us. But he's—" She searched for words. "He's far away most of the time. Even when he's right here, he's somewhere else. So don't expect—" She trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish. Emma nodded understanding. "Good night, Lily." "Good night." Alone in the small room, Emma changed into the borrowed nightgown and wrapper, then sat on the edge of the narrow bed. Through the wall, she could hear Nathan's footsteps in the main room, the creak of floorboards, the sound of him banking the fire for the night. Further away, Owen's voice rose in a brief question, followed by his father's rumbled response. Then silence, settling over the house like the snow settling over the valley outside. Emma lay down beneath quilts that smelled of cedar and cold air, staring at the dark ceiling. One day ago, she'd been Emma Hale, unwanted burden in her uncle's house. Now she was Emma Hale, purchased convenience in a widower's home. Same name, different cage, different faces watching her with varying degrees of suspicion and need. She thought of her mother, dead 7 years now. Wondered what she would say about the path Emma's life had taken. Probably something practical about making the best of circumstances, about finding grace in unlikely places, about the strength that could grow from broken soil. Outside, the wind picked up, howling around the corners of the house. Emma pulled the quilts higher and closed her eyes, too exhausted for tears, too numb for fear. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, learning routines, navigating the minefield of grief that filled every corner of this house, proving herself worthy of the $60 Nathan Cole had paid for her presence. But tonight, she was simply tired, bone-tired from cold and travel and the weight of being unwanted for so long that she'd almost forgotten any other way to be. Sleep came slowly, fitfully, interrupted by unfamiliar sounds and the consciousness of strange walls around her. In the deep hours of night, she woke to hear footsteps in the kitchen, Nathan, moving quietly to avoid disturbing the house, pouring water, standing at the window. Emma lay still, barely breathing, listening to the sounds of a man who couldn't sleep, haunted by ghosts Emma couldn't see but would surely come to know. The footsteps eventually retreated. The house fell silent again, and Emma stared into the darkness, understanding that she'd entered a place where grief was the fifth member of the family. Always present, never invited, impossible to ignore. She'd been bought to be a solution, but solutions required problems to be clearly defined, wounds to be cleanly cut. And the wounds in this house were ragged and deep and still bleeding, no matter how carefully everyone tried to pretend otherwise. Emma closed her eyes again and waited for morning, knowing that dawn would come whether she was ready or not, just as it had come every day since her mother died, every day since Nathan's wife died, every day despite loss and loneliness and all the small deaths of hope that came from living in a world that kept turning regardless of who fell away. Tomorrow she would begin learning how to belong in a place where belonging felt impossible. Tomorrow she would start trying to matter in a house that had forgotten how to let anyone matter too much, because mattering meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant the kind of pain these people had already survived once and couldn't bear to survive again. But tonight, she was just a girl who'd been sold for $60 and a sack of grain, lying in a dead woman's nightgown, in a dead woman's room, wondering if she'd simply traded one kind of invisibility for another. The wind howled, the house creaked, and somewhere in the darkness, Emma Hale, barely 18, orphaned and traded away, made a promise to herself that she'd learn to speak later, when words wouldn't sound so much like begging. For now, silence was enough. Silence and survival. One day at a time, one frozen morning after another, until winter finally broke and something, anything, began to thaw. Morning arrived before Emma was ready for it, announced by the clatter of Lily moving through the kitchen in the pre-dawn darkness. Emma jolted awake, disoriented by unfamiliar walls and the borrowed nightgown twisted around her legs. For one confused moment, she thought she was back in her uncle's house, that yesterday had been a dream. Then memory returned with the cold, the transaction on the porch, the long wagon ride, 3 watchful children, and a man who'd paid $60 for help he couldn't ask for any other way. She dressed quickly in the dim light, her fingers clumsy on the buttons of the work dress Lily had given her the night before. It was indeed too long, the hem dragging on the floor, and too loose through the shoulders. But it was warm and sturdy, and Emma rolled the sleeves up with practiced efficiency before venturing into the kitchen. Lily was already at the stove, coaxing the fire to life with the ease of long practice. She glanced up when Emma entered, her expression carefully neutral in the lamplight. "You're awake," she said, neither pleased nor disappointed, simply stating fact. "I'd like to help," Emma offered. "If you'll show me how you manage things." Something flickered across Lily's face, surprise maybe, or suspicion that Emma's willingness was performance rather than genuine. But she gestured toward the pump. "Water for coffee first. Papa won't speak to anyone until he's had at least 2 cups. Then we start breakfast. Biscuits, bacon if we have it, eggs. Oatmeal for Jacob because he won't eat eggs unless they're scrambled dry, and even then only sometimes." Emma filled the kettle and set it on the stove, while Lily retrieved flour and lard from the pantry. They worked in careful silence, Emma following instructions, Lily offering them in clipped sentences that wasted no words. The girl's efficiency was remarkable for her age, but Emma noticed the cost, the way Lily's jaw stayed tight, her movements precise to the point of rigidity, as though any relaxation might allow something dangerous to slip through. Nathan emerged from his bedroom as the coffee began to boil, his hair damp from washing, his face showing the rough edges of interrupted sleep. He nodded to both of them, but said nothing, just poured himself coffee in a tin cup and stood by the window, looking out at the darkness that hadn't yet yielded to dawn. Owen appeared next, dressed and quiet, his serious eyes taking in the scene, his sister at the stove, Emma rolling out biscuit dough on the worn table, his father staring into nothing. The boy slipped into his chair without disrupting the fragile peace, and Emma noticed how he made himself small, unobtrusive, as though he'd learned that invisibility was safer than presence. Jacob was last, trailing into the kitchen with his wooden horse and sleep-rumpled hair, his blue eyes foggy with dreams not quite released. He stopped when he saw Emma, his small body going still the way a rabbit freezes when it senses a fox. Emma offered him a gentle smile but didn't speak, didn't approach, just returned her attention to the biscuits, giving him space to adjust to her presence. "Come eat, Jake," Nathan said, his voice rough but not unkind. "Emma's helping Miss Lily make breakfast." Jacob moved to his chair with careful steps, placing his wooden horse beside his plate with deliberate precision. Emma watched from the corner of her eye as Lily prepared her brother's oatmeal, adding honey in a specific swirl pattern, placing it in front of him with the spoon positioned just so. These were rituals born of trial and error, Emma understood. Ways of navigating a child's particular needs without making those needs feel like burdens. Breakfast proceeded in near silence, broken only by the scrape of utensils and Nathan's occasional questions about ranch business. Had Owen checked the water troughs yesterday? Were the hens still laying despite the cold? Did Lily need anything from town when he went next week? The questions were practical, focused, requiring yes or no answers that didn't invite elaboration. Emma began to understand that this family had learned to communicate in shorthand. editing out anything that might require emotional exposure. When the meal ended, Nathan pulled on his heavy coat and looked at Emma directly for the first time that morning. "I'll be out with the cattle most of the day. Owen comes with me. You'll stay here with Lily and Jacob, learn the household routines. If there's trouble, ring the bell by the back door. I'll hear it." "Yes, sir," Emma said. He hesitated, as though wanting to say something more, then simply nodded and headed for the door. Owen followed, pausing to grab his own coat from the hook, and then they were gone, leaving Emma alone with Lily and Jacob in a house that suddenly felt cavernous in its quiet. "Dishes first," Lily announced, already gathering plates. "Then we sweep, then laundry if the weather holds. Jacob plays quiet in the morning. He has his horse and his blocks. He doesn't like loud noises or sudden movements." Emma helped clear the table, noting how Jacob had indeed moved to a corner near the fireplace where a small box of wooden blocks waited. He sat cross-legged on the floor, his horse beside him, and began building something with focused intensity. "Does he ever speak?" Emma asked softly, watching the little boy. Lily's hand stilled in the wash basin. "He used to. Before Mama died, he talked constantly, asked 100 questions a day, made up stories about his toys, sang little songs." Her voice had gone distant, remembering. "But when Mama got sick, he got quiet. And after she died, he just stopped. Papa took him to a doctor in Cheyenne last year. The doctor said there was nothing wrong with his throat or his hearing, said sometimes children respond to grief that way, said he'd talk again when he was ready." "But it's been 2 years," Emma said gently. "Yes." Lily scrubbed a plate with unnecessary force. 2 years of silence. 2 years of watching my little brother disappear inside himself while Papa works himself to exhaustion, and Owen tries so hard to be good he barely exists at all, and I— She stopped abruptly, as though only just realizing she was revealing too much to a stranger. "The dishes won't wash themselves." Emma recognized the closed door when she saw it. She picked up the drying cloth and worked beside Lily, respecting the girl's need to retreat back behind her walls. But something had shifted in that moment of honesty, a crack in the fortress, narrow but real. They spent the morning in domestic labor that Emma found both familiar and foreign. Familiar in the tasks themselves, sweeping, dusting, sorting laundry, but foreign in the dynamics of this household. Lily ran the house with military precision, every task scheduled, every item in its designated place. There was no chaos, no laughter, no spontaneity, just routine performed with grim efficiency, as though by maintaining perfect order in the house, they could somehow keep the disorder of grief from overwhelming them entirely. Jacob played quietly throughout, building elaborate structures with his blocks, positioning his wooden horse as though it were surveying the kingdom he'd created. Once he looked up and found Emma watching him. Instead of dropping her gaze, Emma smiled and said softly, "That's a fine castle you're building. Your horse must be very brave to protect it." Jacob's eyes widened slightly, but he didn't look away. For perhaps 5 seconds, they regarded each other across the room, woman and child, stranger and silent boy. Then Jacob returned his attention to his blocks, but Emma noticed his small shoulders had relaxed fractionally, as though her words had been weighed and found acceptable. "He likes you," Lily said from the doorway, her tone suggesting this was unexpected and not entirely welcome. "I like him too," Emma replied simply. "Don't push him to talk. Papa tried that the first year, and it just made Jake hide under his bed for 3 hours." "I won't push, I'll just be here." Lily studied her with those ancient 12-year-old eyes. "You're different than I thought you'd be." "What did you think I'd be?" "I don't know. Harder, maybe. More desperate. Papa said he found you through your uncle, that you needed a place." She paused. "I thought you'd be grateful to the point of being cloying. Or you'd be one of those women who think she can replace our mother just by being female and present." Emma set down the shirt she'd been folding. "Your mother can't be replaced, Lily. She was a specific person who loved you in specific ways. I'm not here to take her place. I'm here because your father needed help, and I needed somewhere to be. Maybe we can figure out what that means as we go." "Papa bought you," Lily said bluntly. "I heard him and Uncle Miller talking. $60. "Yes," Emma acknowledged, not flinching from the truth. "He did." "Does that bother you?" "Being bought?" Emma considered the question carefully. What bothered me was being sold by someone who was supposed to care about me. Your father at least was honest about what he was offering. A roof, food, a purpose. My uncle pretended to be providing for me out of Christian duty while resenting every bite of food I ate. I'll take honest transaction over false charity. Lily absorbed this, her young face thoughtful. Mama wouldn't have wanted us to get someone that way. She would have wanted Papa to marry again properly, for love. Maybe, Emma said gently, but your mama isn't here to want things anymore. And your papa is doing the best he can with impossible circumstances. We all are. The girl's eyes suddenly filled with tears. She blinked back furiously. I miss her so much sometimes I can't breathe, and then I feel guilty for missing her because if I'm missing her, that means I'm not managing well enough without her, and Papa needs me to manage because he can't do everything. Emma moved before thinking, pulling Lily into an embrace the girl initially resisted before suddenly clinging to Emma's borrowed dress and shaking with silent sobs. They stood that way for long minutes, Lily finally permitting herself to be 12 years old and overwhelmed, Emma holding her steady while Jacob watched from his corner with wide, solemn eyes. You're doing beautifully, Emma whispered into Lily's hair. Better than most grown women could do. But you're allowed to be sad. You're allowed to miss her. That doesn't mean you're failing. Lily pulled back, swiping at her eyes with rough hands. Papa can't see me cry. It makes him look like someone's stabbing him. Then cry with me, Emma offered. When you need to. I won't tell. The girl studied her for another long moment, then nodded once. Some understanding had been reached, fragile but real. She moved back to the laundry with red eyes but straighter shoulders, and they finished the work in companionable silence. Noon came and went. Emma prepared a simple meal of bread and cheese and leftover stew, warming it on the stove while Lily set the table. Jacob ate his portion with the same focused precision he brought to his block building, and Lily managed to consume half her serving before restlessness drove her to the window. They're still out with the herd, she said, though no one had asked. Sometimes Papa doesn't come back until nearly dark in winter. The cattle scatter looking for forage, and he has to ride the whole range to count heads and check for injuries. Is it dangerous? Emma asked. Everything's dangerous out here. Weather can turn in minutes. Wolves run in packs. Horses throw riders. But Papa's careful, and Owen's learning to be the same. She paused. Mama used to worry herself sick every time Papa went out, but worrying didn't keep her safe when fever came, so what's the point? The bleakness in those words made Emma's chest ache. This child had learned too young that worry was futile, that bad things happened regardless of precaution, that loving people meant watching them walk into danger daily and pretending it didn't terrify you. I think, Emma said carefully, that worrying is how we know we love someone. It's not about keeping them safe. You're right, we can't always do that, but it's about them mattering enough that their absence leaves a hollow place. Lily turned from the window. Did you worry about your uncle when he was gone? No, Emma admitted. But I worried about my mother every day she was sick, and it didn't save her. So I understand what you mean about the futility. But I also think... She stopped, gathering her thoughts. I think the worrying meant something to her, knowing she was loved enough to be worried over. Maybe that's worth something, even if it doesn't change outcomes. Mama knew we loved her, Lily said fiercely. She died knowing that. Then she died with something precious, Emma said. Not everyone does. They returned to work, the afternoon passing in incremental tasks that Emma was beginning to memorize. She learned where Nathan kept his rifle and the ammunition, learned which of the hens were reliable layers and which were past their prime, learned that the barn cat would tolerate petting only on his own terms, and the milk cow needed her, right side approached slowly or she'd kick. She learned that Lily sang under her breath when she thought no one was listening, old hymns their mother had taught her. And she learned that Jacob would sometimes bring his wooden horse to wherever Emma was working and simply stand nearby, not speaking, but present in a way that felt like the beginning of trust. Nathan and Owen returned as the sun dropped toward the mountains, both of them snow-covered and exhausted. Nathan's face was red from wind, his beard crusted with ice, but his eyes swept the house with evident relief when he entered and found everything in order. Fire burning, dinner underway, his children safe. Trouble? Lily asked, already moving to help her father with his coat. Lost 2 head to wolves, Nathan said, his voice heavy. Found them in the north pasture, torn up bad. I'll need to take the rifle out tonight, see if I can track the pack before they come back for more. I'll come with you, Owen offered immediately, though Emma could see the exhaustion in his young face. No, you'll stay here. I need you rested for tomorrow. We've got fence repairs on the east boundary. Nathan's tone allowed no argument. His eyes found Emma's. Any problems here? None, Emma said. The house ran smoothly. He nodded, a muscle in his jaw working as though he wanted to say more but couldn't find the words. Instead, he moved to the wash basin, scrubbing ice from his beard and grime from his hands while Lily served dinner with her usual efficiency. They ate quickly, the meal punctuated by Nathan's clipped summary of the day's work and his plans for tomorrow. Emma noticed how he spoke to his children but rarely looked at them directly, as though eye contact required vulnerability he couldn't afford. She noticed how Owen hung on his father's every word, seeking approval that Nathan gave sparingly. And she noticed how Jacob watched his father with a longing so intense it was painful to witness, a small boy aching for connection with a parent who'd locked himself behind walls of grief and work. After dinner, Nathan retrieved his rifle and checked the ammunition with practiced movements. I'll be back before midnight, he told Lily. Bar the door after me. Emma knows about the bell if you need me. Yes, Papa, Lily said, but her voice had gone tight with worry she'd claimed was pointless. Nathan paused at the door, his hand on the latch. For a moment, Emma thought he might offer reassurance, might acknowledge the fear in his daughter's eyes. But he simply pulled his hat lower and stepped into the night, closing the door firmly behind him. Lily stood frozen, staring at the closed door. He'll be careful, Emma said softly. He has too much to come back to. Mama thought she'd come back too, Lily whispered. From the fever. She kept saying, I'll be better tomorrow. Don't worry. And then there wasn't a tomorrow. Emma had no answer for that, no platitude that wouldn't ring hollow, so she simply moved beside Lily and stood with her, 2 people waiting for someone to return from darkness, hoping that hope wasn't futile, knowing that sometimes it was. Owen had taken Jacob upstairs for bed, and Emma could hear the murmur of the older boy's voice reading a story, patient and gentle. She helped Lily clean the dinner dishes, then joined her by the fire where the girl had pulled out a basket of mending. May I help? Emma asked. Lily handed her a shirt with a torn sleeve and a needle already threaded. They worked in silence for a while, the only sounds the crack of burning wood and the whisper of wind outside. Emma's stitches were neat and small. Her mother had taught her well, and she saw Lily notice this with approval. Where did you live before? Lily asked eventually. Before your uncle's house? A farm about 10 miles east of town. My father worked the land and my mother kept house and tended a garden that people came from miles to see. She had a gift with growing things. Emma's hand stilled on the mending, memory washing over her. When she died, my father lasted 6 months. The doctor said his heart gave out, but I think he just couldn't find a reason to keep going without her. So you were alone at 12, Lily said, understanding dawning. Like me. Not quite like you. I had no siblings to care for, no household to maintain, just grief and my uncle's reluctant charity. Emma resumed her stitching. You're much braver than I was. I don't feel brave. I feel tired. Those aren't mutually exclusive. They worked until the mending basket was empty, then Lily banked the fire and checked that the door was barred. Emma retreated to her small room but left the door ajar, listening to the sounds of the house settling. Lily climbing the stairs to the loft room she'd once shared with her mother, Owen's quiet goodnight to his sister, the creak of beds receiving tired bodies. Emma changed into the borrowed nightgown and slipped under the quilts, but sleep eluded her. She found herself straining to hear hoofbeats that would signal Nathan's return, found herself counting the hours by the chime of the clock in the main room. 11. 11:30. Midnight came and went with no sound of arrival. She told herself he'd said before midnight, not at midnight, that he was an experienced frontiersman who knew these lands in all seasons, that worry was futile, as Lily had said. But still she lay awake staring at darkness, wondering if this was what it meant to begin caring about people, this low-grade dread that accompanied their absence. It was nearly 1 in the morning when Emma finally heard the thud of hooves in the yard, the sound of Nathan speaking low to his horse, the barn door sliding shut. She released a breath she hadn't known she was holding and closed her eyes, sleep finally willing to come now that the household was complete again. The next days fell into patterns that became familiar through repetition. Emma rose with Lily each morning, learned the rhythms of the household, the preferences and quirks of each family member. She discovered that Nathan took his coffee black and scalding, that Owen had a sweet tooth he tried to hide, that Jacob would eat carrots only if they were cut into precise circles. She learned which floorboards creaked, which windows stuck, where the roof leaked when snow melted, and how to bank the fire so it lasted through the coldest hours without consuming too much wood. She learned, too, that Nathan Cole was a man of few words but consistent action. He never praised directly, but Emma noticed that he left firewood stacked by the kitchen door each morning before she woke, noticed that he'd repaired the pump handle that had been sticking, noticed that he nodded approval when he saw her teaching Owen his letters in the afternoons while Lily worked on dinner. Owen warmed to her gradually, his initial wariness melting into cautious trust. He began bringing her questions about his lessons, asking her to explain arithmetic problems, or help him parse difficult words in his readers. Emma discovered he had a sharp mind and an insatiable curiosity about the world beyond their valley. He wanted to know about oceans he'd never seen, cities he'd only read about, inventions and discoveries that were transforming the eastern states. "Do you think I could go to a real school someday?" he asked her one afternoon, his voice hesitant. "Not just lessons from books at home, but a proper academy?" "I think," Emma said carefully, "that a mind like yours deserves every opportunity. But that's a conversation for your father. Papa says there's no money for such things, that the ranch needs all hands." Owen's disappointment was palpable. "I don't want to be ungrateful. The ranch is important. But sometimes I want more," Emma finished for him. "You want more than survival. You want possibility. Is that selfish?" "No, sweetheart. That's human." Jacob remained largely silent, but his presence around Emma increased daily. He began following her from room to room, his wooden horse always in hand, watching her work with solemn intensity. Sometimes he would stand so close their shadows touched, and Emma would narrate what she was doing in a gentle voice. "Now I'm kneading the bread dough. See how the flour dusts my hands? Your mama probably made bread just this way." She never pushed him to respond, never made his silence uncomfortable. And slowly, gradually, she saw him relax in her presence, saw the fear in his blue eyes dim to mere caution. It was Lily whose walls proved slowest to lower. The girl remained polite but distant, cooperating with Emma but never quite trusting her. Emma understood. Lily had been lady of the house for 2 years, had held her family together through sheer stubborn will, and now here was a stranger, threatening that hard-won authority. Emma was careful never to override Lily's decisions, never to criticize the systems the girl had established. Instead, she worked within Lily's framework, offering help rather than taking over, suggesting rather than demanding. But there were moments, brief and precious, when Lily forgot to guard herself. When she laughed at something Owen said and sounded like a child instead of a tiny adult. When she asked Emma's advice about a recipe and actually listened to the answer. When she admitted, voice small, that she was afraid she was forgetting what her mother's voice sounded like. "Write down what you remember," Emma suggested during one of these moments. Not just her voice, but specific things she said, the way she sang certain songs, her favorite phrases, the nicknames she had for each of you. Write it all down so even if the sound fades, the words remain. Lily had looked at her with something like gratitude before the walls came back up. But later, Emma saw the girl sitting at the table with paper and pencil, writing carefully, tears sliding down her cheeks unchecked. 3 weeks passed this way. 3 weeks of slowly learning to navigate each other, of establishing tentative connections, of building something that wasn't quite family but was no longer merely strangers sharing space. Emma began to feel the beginnings of purpose, the sense that perhaps she did matter here, that perhaps these people needed her in ways that went beyond cooking and cleaning. And then came the night that shattered everything fragile they'd been building. It started with a simple conversation Emma hadn't meant to overhear. She'd come from the barn after checking on the milk cow, her arms full of firewood, and she'd paused outside the kitchen window when she heard Nathan's voice inside deeper than usual with frustration. I know it's not ideal, Lily, but it's working, he was saying. The house is running better. You're not carrying everything alone. The boys are better looked after. But you don't even like her, Papa. Lily's voice was quiet but cutting. You barely speak to her. You flinch when she's too close. She's just convenient, isn't she? Just another tool you bought to keep the ranch running. There was a long pause. Then Nathan's voice, flat and final. She is convenient, yes. That's exactly what she is. I needed help. I bought help. I don't need to like her or not like her. She performs a function. Emma stood frozen in the darkness, firewood forgotten in her arms, those words echoing in her skull. She performs a function. Not a person. Not someone who might matter. Just a tool. Convenient. She'd been traded away by one family that saw her as a burden and bought by another that saw her as a solution. Same reduction of a person to utility, different house. Nothing had changed except the walls around her. Something inside Emma, already fragile from years of being unwanted, finally cracked. She set the firewood down silently and walked past the kitchen window, past the house entirely, out into the snow-covered yard. She kept walking, her thin shawl no match for the cold, her borrowed dress dragging in the snow. She walked past the barn, past the corrals, following the path that led toward the creek and the mountains beyond. She'd thought, foolishly, she saw now, that she was building something here. That caring for these children, learning their needs, making space for their grief, meant something. That her presence had value beyond the tasks she could perform. But she was just convenient, just a tool Nathan had purchased when other tools were unavailable. Emma walked until her legs ached and her lungs burned from cold air, walked until she reached the frozen creek where willows stood skeletal against the night sky. She sank down on a fallen log, wrapping her shawl tighter, and for the first time since her mother's death, let herself cry. Deep, wrenching sobs that came from a place beyond words, beyond reason, from the accumulated weight of being seen as less than human for so long, she'd almost accepted it as truth. She didn't hear the hoofbeats at first, didn't register Nathan's shout until he was almost upon her, his horse throwing snow as it slid to a stop. He dropped from the saddle and grabbed Emma's shoulders, spinning her to face him. What in God's name are you doing out here? His voice was raw with fear and fury. Do you have any idea how cold it is? How dangerous? You could have... He stopped, seeing her face in the moonlight, the tears frozen on her cheeks. His hands loosened but didn't release her. Emma? She tried to speak, but her throat was too tight. She could only shake her head, pulling away from his grip. Did something happen? Are you hurt? Talk to me. His fear was transmuting to anger, the way fear often does. You can't just walk off into the wilderness in the middle of the night. The children woke up, found you gone. Lily was beside herself, thinking, I'm convenient, Emma finally managed, her voice breaking. I perform a function. That's all, isn't it? That's all I am here. Nathan went very still. In the moonlight, Emma saw realization dawn in his face, followed by something that might have been shame. You heard, he said quietly. I heard. Emma wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly colder than the night could account for. And you were right. You bought me. I'm no different than your horses or your tools. I should have remembered that. Emma, no. She held up a hand, stopping him. I understand. I thought... She laughed bitterly. I thought maybe I was beginning to matter, to the children, if not to you. But I was fooling myself. I'm good at that, making myself believe I'm more than people see me as. My uncle taught me that lesson, and apparently I needed it repeated. Nathan ran a hand through his hair, his breath clouding in the frozen air. It's not that simple. It seems quite simple to me. You don't understand. Then explain it to me, Emma demanded, finding anger beneath the hurt. Explain how I'm supposed to care for your children, mend their clothes, cook their meals, wipe their tears, listen to their fears, and remain just a tool. Just convenient. How do I do that, Mr. Cole? How do I matter enough to be useful, but not enough to be human? The words hung between them, sharp as icicles. Nathan stared at her, his face working through emotions Emma couldn't name. I can't, he said finally, his voice rough. I can't explain that because you're right. It's impossible. He took a step closer, and Emma saw something raw in his eyes, something he'd been keeping locked away. "But I'm afraid, Emma. I'm afraid to let you matter because everyone who matters leaves, and I can't—" His voice cracked. "I can't survive that again. I barely survived losing Sarah. So I tell myself you're just convenient, just help I hired, because if you're just convenient, then it won't destroy me if you leave too." The honesty of it stole Emma's breath. She saw him clearly for the first time, not the cold employer, not the distant father, but a man so wounded by loss he'd amputated his own capacity to care in order to survive. "I'm not your wife," Emma said quietly. "I'm not trying to replace her. But I'm also not nothing, Nathan. I'm a person who's here, who's trying, who cares about your children even though I probably shouldn't. And if you need me to be just a tool, just convenient, then we both need to stop pretending this arrangement can work." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I won't stay somewhere I don't matter. I've done that my whole life, and I won't do it anymore." Emma's voice was steady now, despite the tears still cold on her face. "So you decide. Am I a person here, with all the messy complications that entails? Or am I just convenient? Because I can't be both." Nathan stared at her for a long moment, his face a mask of conflict. Then, slowly he reached out and took her frozen hands in his warm ones. "You matter," he said hoarsely. "To the children, to—" He swallowed hard. "To me. And that terrifies me more than wolves or winter or any damn thing else on this earth." Emma felt something shift between them. Not resolution, but acknowledgement. Truth spoken into the frozen night. "Then maybe," she said softly, "we both need to be brave enough to be terrified together." He nodded slowly, then removed his heavy coat and draped it around her shoulders. "Come back to the house, please. The children are worried, and you're half frozen." Emma let him help her onto his horse, let him swing up behind her and turn them toward home. They rode in silence, but it was a different silence than before. Less empty, more full of things unsaid but finally acknowledged. When they reached the house, all three children were huddled in the kitchen doorway, Lily holding Jacob, who was crying silently, Owen white-faced with worry. The sight of them, her children, she realized with a start, hers in the way that mattered even if not by blood, made Emma's throat tight. Nathan dismounted and lifted her down, steady and careful. The children rushed forward, Lily reaching her first. "You scared us," the girl said, her voice shaking. "We thought you'd left. We thought—" "I'm sorry," Emma said, pulling Lily into an embrace and extending her arm to include Owen. "I'm so sorry. I wasn't thinking clearly, but I'm here now and I'm not leaving." Jacob stood slightly apart, his wooden horse clutched to his chest, his face streaked with tears. Emma knelt down to his level, not touching him, but meeting his eyes. "I'm sorry I frightened you, Jacob," she said gently. "That was wrong of me." The little boy stared at her, his blue eyes enormous in his small face. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. And then, in a voice rusty from 2 years of silence, he whispered a single word that shattered and remade everything. "Mama?" The world stopped. Emma's breath caught. Nathan made a sound like he'd been struck. Lily's hand flew to her mouth. Jacob took a step forward, then another, his small body trembling. "Mama came back?" he said, louder now, hope and confusion and desperate need tangled in those 4 words. "You came back?" "Oh, sweetheart," Emma breathed, her heart breaking for this child who'd been so young when he lost his mother, that her face had blurred into an ache of absence. She wanted to explain, to correct the misunderstanding gently, but Lily spoke first, dropping to her knees beside Emma. "Jake, no, this is Emma. She's not Mama. Mama couldn't come back." Lily's voice cracked. "But Emma is here, and she's not leaving us. Right, Emma?" Emma looked up at Nathan, saw the raw vulnerability in his face as he watched his youngest son finally speak again, finally reach for connection, even if he'd confused its source. Then she looked back at Jacob, at his tear-stained face and trembling mouth. "I'm not your mama," Emma said softly, taking his small hands in hers. "But I'm here, Jacob. I'm here. And I care about you, and I'm not leaving. Can that be enough?" Jacob stared at her, processing, his mind working behind those blue eyes. Then, slowly, he nodded and stepped into her arms, his wooden horse pressed between them, his small body finally allowing itself to be held. Emma gathered him close, and Owen and Lily pressed in too, and for a moment they were simply a tangle of people who needed each other, who'd been broken by loss but were finding ways to piece themselves back together. When Emma finally looked up, Nathan was watching them with an expression she couldn't fully read. Grief and relief and fear and something else. Something that looked like the beginning of hope. The night was cold and the future uncertain, but inside that warm kitchen, holding children who'd finally let her matter, Emma understood that she'd found something her $60 price had never been meant to purchase. A reason to stop walking into the snow when the world felt too cruel to bear. They stood that way for several minutes, the four of them entangled in the kitchen's warmth, while Nathan remained at the threshold, neither entering fully nor retreating. Emma felt Jacob's heartbeat against her chest, rapid as a bird's, and she stroked his hair with gentle repetition until the trembling in his small body began to ease. Owen had his face pressed against Emma's shoulder, and Lily's grip on her arm was fierce enough to leave marks. But Emma welcomed every point of contact, every evidence that she mattered to these children in ways that transcended convenience or transaction. When Jacob finally pulled back, his face was blotchy from tears, but his eyes held a clarity they'd lacked before. He looked at Emma seriously, then at his father, then back to Emma. "You're not Mama," he said, the words careful and deliberate, as though he were testing their shape after years of silence. "No, sweetheart, I'm Emma." "But you're staying?" "I'm staying." He nodded once, apparently satisfied with this arrangement, and turned to his father. "Papa, I'm tired." Nathan's face worked through several emotions before he found his voice. "Of course you are, son. It's late. Let's get you to bed." But Jacob shook his head and reached for Emma's hand. "Emma puts me to bed now," he said simply, and Emma saw Nathan flinch as though struck. "Jake, your papa," Emma began, but Nathan interrupted. "It's all right." His voice was rough. "If that's what he wants." He moved toward the stairs, then paused. "I'll check the stock one more time before I turn in. Lily, Owen, you should sleep too. Morning comes early." He left before anyone could respond, and Emma heard the back door close with careful control, as though Nathan were holding himself together through sheer force of will. She understood. His son had spoken for the first time in 2 years, and those first words had been a request for someone other than his father. That would cut deep, regardless of logic or understanding. "Come on," Emma said to Jacob, taking his hand. "Let's get you warm and settled." She carried him upstairs to the small room he shared with Owen, helped him into his nightshirt, and tucked him under the quilts his mother had surely made. The wooden horse went under his pillow, positioned just so, and Emma wondered how many nights Sarah Cole had performed this same ritual, had smoothed this same hair, had kissed this same forehead. "Emma?" Jacob's voice was small in the darkness. "Yes?" "I'm sorry I called you Mama. Lily says that was wrong." Emma sat on the edge of his bed, choosing her words carefully. "It wasn't wrong, Jacob. You've been quiet for a long time, and when you finally spoke, you used the word that meant person who takes care of me. That makes perfect sense. But your mama was a specific person named Sarah, and she loved you very much. I'm a different person named Emma, and I care about you very much. Can we both be true?" He thought about this, his young face serious in the lamplight. "Lily remembers Mama's face. I don't, not really, just pieces. Her hands when she braided Lily's hair, her voice singing, but I can't remember the words. Is that bad?" "Oh, sweetheart, no. You were very young when she died. It's not bad that memories fade. That's just how time works. But the love doesn't fade. That stays, even when faces blur." "Do you think she knows I can talk again?" The question pierced Emma's heart. "I think if there's any way for her to know, she does. And I think she'd be so proud of you for being brave enough to use your voice again." Jacob nodded, apparently satisfied, and his eyes began to droop. "Will you stay until I'm asleep?" "Of course." She sat with him, humming softly, until his breathing deepened into sleep. When she finally rose and descended the stairs, she found Lily waiting in the kitchen, her young face drawn with exhaustion and emotion. "He talked," Lily said, as though still trying to process the miracle. 2 years of silence, and he finally talked. He was ready, Emma said simply, because of you. Because you scared him so badly he had to find his voice to call you back. Lily's tone held no accusation, just observation. Perhaps, or perhaps he was ready anyway, and tonight just provided the moment. Emma moved to the stove, checking that the fire was properly banked. You should sleep, Lily. You're exhausted. So are you. The girl hesitated, then added quietly, I heard what Papa said, about you being convenient, and I heard what you said back. Emma turned to face her. And? And you were right. You're not nothing. Lily struggled with the words. You're the person who held us tonight when we were scared, who Jacob reached for, who Owen asks questions, who listened when I needed to cry about Mama. She paused. Who told Papa he had to choose whether you matter or not? Are you angry with me for that? No. Lily's voice was firm. I'm grateful. Someone needed to make him see what he was doing, how he was... She stopped, looking down at her hands. After Mama died, Papa just shut down. He works and he provides, and he's never cruel, but it's like he locked all his feelings in a box and threw away the key. I've been so angry at him for that, but I didn't know how to say it. You said it. I think, Emma said gently, that your Papa is just terrified of losing anyone else he loves. It's easier to keep distance than risk that kind of pain again. But that's not living. That's just surviving. Lily's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Mama wouldn't want us just surviving. She'd want us to be happy again someday. I think you're right, and I think slowly we might be finding our way there. Emma moved to Lily and drew her into an embrace. Now go to bed before you fall asleep standing up. Lily clung to her for a moment, then pulled back and headed for the stairs. At the bottom step, she paused. Emma, thank you for coming back, for not leaving us. Thank you for giving me a reason to come back. After Lily disappeared upstairs, Emma stood alone in the quiet kitchen, her body aching with exhaustion, but her mind too full for sleep. She moved to the window and looked out at the dark shapes of barn and mountains beyond, and saw a shadowed figure standing by the corral fence. Nathan, still avoiding the house, wrestling with whatever thoughts had driven him out into the cold. Emma pulled her shawl around her shoulders and stepped outside. The snow crunched under her feet as she crossed the yard, and Nathan turned at her approach, his face half hidden in shadow. Jacob's asleep, she said, stopping a few feet away. He asked me to stay with him until he settled. I'm glad. Nathan's voice was neutral, but Emma heard the hurt beneath it. He's not rejecting you, Nathan. He's just confused and scared and latching on to whoever feels safest in this moment. Tomorrow it might be you he asks for. Children aren't constant in their affections. They shift depending on their needs. I know that. Logically, I know that. He turned back to the corral, watching the horses move restlessly in the darkness. But it still feels like I'm failing them. Like I failed Sarah by not saving her, and now I'm failing our children by not being what they need. You're not failing them. You're keeping them alive, keeping the ranch running, teaching them to survive in a harsh world. That's not nothing. It's not enough. The words were quiet but fierce. Owen wants books and learning I can't give him. Lily's had to grow up too fast, taking on responsibilities that should have been mine. And Jacob spent 2 years silent because I didn't know how to reach him through his grief. What kind of father am I? The kind who's doing his best with impossible circumstances, Emma said firmly. The kind who loves his children enough to terrify himself by letting another person matter. That's not failure, Nathan. That's courage. He was quiet for a long moment, his breath clouding in the frozen air. When Sarah died, I thought I'd die too. Wanted to, some days. But the children needed me, so I locked everything down and just kept moving. One foot in front of the other, one day after another. I thought if I could just maintain control, keep everything ordered and predictable, we'd survive. And we have survived. But you're right. We haven't lived. It's not too late to start. Isn't it? I've already damaged them. Jacob's silence, Lily's burden, Owen's resignation. Stop, Emma interrupted. You're giving yourself too much credit for their struggles and not enough for their strengths. Jacob spoke tonight because he felt safe enough to try. Lily's competence and caring are remarkable because you've shown her those values matter. Owen's mind is hungry because you've encouraged his learning even when resources are limited. Yes, they've suffered loss. Yes, they carry pain. But they're also brave and good and capable of healing. Don't reduce them to their wounds. Nathan turned to look at her directly, and even in the darkness, Emma could see the raw vulnerability in his expression. How do you do that? Do what? See clearly when I'm drowning in guilt and fear. Say the things that need saying even when they're hard to hear. He took a step closer. I told you I bought you because I needed convenient help, but the truth is, I think I needed you for reasons I couldn't name. Needed someone to tell me when I'm being a coward. Needed someone to love my children without reservation. Needed someone to make me remember that surviving isn't the same as living. Emma's breath caught. Nathan, I'm not saying this well. I'm not good with words like this. But you matter, Emma. Not because of what you do, but because of who you are. And that scares the hell out of me because mattering means I have something to lose again. We all have things to lose, Emma said softly. That's what it means to care about people. But the alternative, keeping everyone at distance, staying safe behind walls, that's not protection. That's prison. I know. He reached out hesitantly, and Emma met him halfway, letting him take her hand. His palm was rough and warm, his grip gentle despite the calluses. I'm going to be bad at this. At letting people matter, I'll retreat and push away and forget to say the things that need saying. But I want to try. For the children. For... He paused. For you. Emma squeezed his hand. Then we'll try together, and when you retreat, I'll pull you back. And when I doubt, you'll remind me I matter. We'll figure it out as we go. They stood that way for several minutes, hands linked in the darkness, breath clouding between them, the cold biting at exposed skin, but neither willing to be the first to let go. Finally, Nathan stirred. We should go inside before we freeze. Morning still comes early regardless of dramatic midnight confessions. Emma smiled despite herself. Was that humor, Mr. Cole? Careful, or people will think you're human. I am human, I'm just rusty at showing it. He released her hand but stayed close as they walked back toward the house. Emma, about what happened tonight, what you overheard me say to Lily, we don't need to revisit it. You've explained and I've heard you. But I want you to understand. When I said you were convenient, I was trying to convince myself as much as Lily. Trying to maintain the fiction that I was in control, that I hadn't already started. He stopped, searching for words. Started needing you. Started depending on your presence. Started noticing how the house feels different when you're in it. Warmer somehow, fuller. I was lying to protect myself, and instead I hurt you. I'm sorry for that. Apology accepted. They'd reached the back door, and Emma paused with her hand on the latch. But Nathan, you need to know something too. I'm not Sarah. I'll never be Sarah, and I'm not trying to be. What's growing between us? This tentative, terrifying thing, it's its own entity, not a replacement or a substitution. Does that make sense? Yes. His voice was rough, and I'm grateful for it. I loved Sarah with everything I had, and I'll always grieve her. But what I'm beginning to feel for you... He stopped, shook his head. It's too soon to name it, too fragile. Can we just let it be undefined for now? We can let it be whatever it needs to be. They entered the house together, and Emma barred the door while Nathan checked the fire. The clock showed nearly 2 a.m, and exhaustion pulled at Emma's bones. But there was a lightness, too, a sense that something fundamental had shifted tonight, that the family she'd entered as a purchased convenience had become something more complex and precious than transaction could capture. She retired to her small room, changed into her nightgown, and slipped beneath the quilts. Sleep came quickly this time, deep and dreamless, and she woke to morning light and the sound of Jacob's voice in the kitchen, not loud or constant, but there, tentatively testing the waters of speech after 2 years of silence. Emma dressed quickly and emerged to find Jacob at the table, telling Owen about a dream he'd had involving his wooden horse and a dragon made of snow. Owen listened with encouraging attention, while Lily stood at the stove with tears streaming down her face as she fried eggs and bacon. Nathan stood by the window with his coffee, watching his youngest son talk, his expression naked with relief and grief and overwhelming love. When his eyes met Emma's across the room, she saw gratitude there, and something more, recognition of partnership, of shared responsibility for these children who were beginning to heal. The next weeks brought changes that were sometimes smooth and often stumbling. Jacob's newfound voice was hesitant at first, his sentences short and carefully constructed, but each day he spoke a little more. He asked questions about the horses and the cattle, wondered aloud about whether spring would come early, told meandering stories about his wooden horse's adventures. Sometimes he went quiet again for hours, retreating back into silence when the world felt overwhelming, but Emma learned not to push. She simply stayed present, accepting both his words and his silences as equally valid. Owen flourished under the attention Emma could now more freely provide. She helped him with mathematics in the afternoons, explaining concepts Nathan didn't have time or sometimes knowledge to teach. She found old newspapers Nathan had saved for kindling and let Owen read the stories, feeding his hunger for information about the wider world. And when Owen confessed his dream of attending a real academy someday, Emma didn't dismiss it as impractical, but instead suggested he write to the territorial school board to inquire about scholarship opportunities. "Papa will never allow it," Owen said, but his eyes held hope despite his words. "Let's find out what's possible first," Emma replied. "Then we'll talk to your father about the future." Lily remained the most complicated, her emotions swinging between acceptance of Emma's presence and fierce protective loyalty to her mother's memory. Some days she worked alongside Emma with easy companionship, sharing stories about Sarah, how she'd sung while she worked, her talent for predicting weather, her insistence that children needed beauty alongside survival. Other days, Lily withdrew into formality, calling Emma Miss Emma instead of just Emma, maintaining careful distance as though reminding herself not to grow too attached. Emma understood. Lily had been parentified too young, forced into adult responsibilities before she'd finished being a child. Surrendering that role meant trusting Emma not just with household tasks, but with the family's emotional well-being. That kind of trust couldn't be rushed. Nathan, true to his word, was indeed bad at letting people matter. He'd have days of relative openness, helping Emma with heavy tasks without being asked, sitting at the dinner table and actually engaging in conversation, meeting her eyes with warmth that made her breath catch. Then something would spook him, usually a memory of Sarah, or a moment when Emma's laughter filled the house the way Sarah's once had, and he'd retreat behind walls of distant politeness that could last for days. Emma learned not to take it personally, learned to simply wait him out, to continue being present regardless of his emotional availability. And slowly, gradually, his retreats became shorter and his returns easier, as though he were learning that letting her matter wouldn't actually destroy him. They were navigating this fragile new dynamic when Owen came down with fever in late February. It started mild, a slight flush, a complaint of headache, but by evening his skin was burning and he was shaking with chills despite being buried under every blanket they could find. Emma recognized the terror in Nathan's face immediately. Fever had taken Sarah. Fever was the enemy that had shattered this family once before, and now it had returned for his son. "We need to get his temperature down," Emma said, forcing her voice to stay calm, even as fear clawed at her throat. "Cold cloths, plenty of water. Lily, boil water for willow bark tea. It'll help with the fever. Nathan, help me get him into dry clothes. He's soaked through with sweat." Nathan moved like a man in a nightmare, his hands shaking as he helped Emma change Owen's nightshirt. The boy was only half conscious, mumbling about dragons and spelling tests, his eyes glassy and unfocused. "He's gonna die," Nathan said flatly, "just like Sarah. I'm gonna watch him die and not be able to stop it." "He's not going to die," Emma said fiercely, gripping Nathan's arm hard enough to bruise. "Do you hear me? We're going to fight this, and he's going to survive. But I need you present, Nathan. I need you here with me, not disappearing into fear. Can you do that?" He stared at her, his face working through emotions, then nodded slowly. "Tell me what to do." They fell into a routine of crisis management. Emma sponging Owen's burning skin with cool water. Nathan supporting his son's head while Emma coaxed willow bark tea past his cracked lips. Lily keeping fresh cloths coming and water boiling. Jacob standing wide-eyed in the doorway, clutching his wooden horse. The night stretched endlessly, punctuated by Owen's fevered muttering and the clock's relentless chiming of passing hours. Near dawn, Owen's fever spiked dangerously high. His body convulsed, his eyes rolling back, and Nathan made a sound like a wounded animal. "No," he said, his voice breaking. "Please, not again. Please." "Nathan," Emma said sharply. "Look at me." She waited until his panicked eyes focused on her face. "He's still breathing. His heart's still beating. We haven't lost him. Stay with me. Stay with him. He needs to hear your voice." Nathan swallowed hard, then leaned close to his son. "Owen, I'm here. Papa's here. You keep fighting. You hear me? You're strong and smart, and you've got too much living ahead of you to give up now. I need you, son. Your brother and sister need you. Emma needs you, so you fight." Whether Owen heard or not, Emma couldn't say, but Nathan's voice seemed to steady him. The convulsions eased, and though the fever remained high, it stopped climbing. They continued their vigil through the morning, taking turns holding cold claws to Owen's forehead, forcing tiny sips of water past his lips, talking to him constantly. Nathan sharing memories of Owen's childhood, Emma describing the books she'd teach him when he was well, Lily promising to make his favorite berry pie, Jacob offering to let him play with the wooden horse. By noon, the fever finally broke. Owen's skin cooled, his breathing deepened from shallow pants to regular sleep, and Emma felt her knees nearly give out with relief. Nathan buried his face in his hands and wept, great wrenching sobs he'd probably been holding back since Sarah's death. Emma moved to him and pulled his head against her shoulder, letting him shake apart in her arms while Lily cried quietly into her apron and Jacob pressed close to Emma's side. "He's going to be all right," Emma murmured into Nathan's hair. "You didn't lose him. He's going to be all right." When Nathan finally composed himself, he looked at Emma with red-rimmed eyes. "I couldn't have survived this without you. If I'd been alone again, watching another person I love—" He stopped, shook his head. "Thank you for being here, for knowing what to do, for not letting me drown in fear. We're a family," Emma said simply. "This is what families do." The words hung in the air between them, enormous in their implications. Nathan reached up and cupped her face in his rough palm, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "A family," he repeated quietly, as though testing the idea. Then, "Yes, I suppose we are." Owen slept through the rest of the day and into the evening, his body exhausted from fighting the fever. Emma dozed in the chair beside his bed, jerking awake whenever he stirred, checking his forehead for signs of returning fever. Nathan brought her food she barely touched, stood guard at the window as though he could protect his son through sheer vigilance. When Owen finally woke as the sun was setting, his eyes clear and focused, the first thing he said was, "Did I miss my lessons?" Emma laughed, relief making her giddy. "Yes, but I think we can forgive that under the circumstances." "How long was I sick?" "Just a day, though it felt longer," Nathan said from the doorway. "How do you feel, son?" "Tired, thirsty. My head hurts." Owen tried to sit up, and Emma gently pushed him back down. "You rest. I'll bring you water and some broth. Lily's been making it all day, waiting for you to wake up." Over the next few days, Owen recovered his strength while the household slowly returned to normal rhythms. But something had changed during those fever-pitched hours. Some final barrier had dissolved, leaving the five of them bound more tightly together. Nathan no longer retreated into distance when emotion threatened to overwhelm him. Lily stopped testing Emma's commitment with challenges designed to prove she'd leave eventually. Jacob spoke more freely, his voice growing stronger with use. And Owen, perhaps sensing how close he'd come to leaving them, seemed to cherish every moment with a new intensity. They were sitting around the dinner table one evening in early March, the conversation flowing easily, when Jacob suddenly announced, "Emma's my mama now." The room went still. Emma's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. Nathan's eyes lifted to her face. Lily looked stricken. "Jake, we talked about this," Lily said carefully. "Emma isn't our mother. Mama died." "I know Mama Sarah died," Jacob said patiently, as though explaining something obvious to adults who weren't quite keeping up. "But Emma's my mama now. She takes care of us and makes our food and tucks me in and tells Papa when he's being scared instead of brave. That's what mamas do." "It's not that simple, sweetheart," Emma began, but Jacob shook his head. "Why not? Owen says words mean what we decide they mean. So I decided Emma is my mama. Not the same as Mama Sarah, but my mama now. Emma looked helplessly at Nathan, unsure how to navigate this declaration. But Nathan was looking at Jacob with something like wonder in his face. I think, Nathan said slowly, that Jake might be wiser than the rest of us. Maybe mama isn't about blood or replacement. Maybe it's just about who stays and who loves and who shows up every day. His eyes found Emma's across the table. In which case, if Jake wants to call you mama, I think that's his right to choose. But mama, Lily started, her voice tight. Your mama Sarah would want you to be loved and cared for, Nathan interrupted gently. She'd want you to have someone who helps carry the weight. She wouldn't see Emma as a threat to her memory. She'd see her as a gift. Lily's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded slowly. Mama always said love multiplies. It doesn't divide. That having more people to love doesn't mean loving anyone less. That sounds like something Sarah would say, Emma said softly. So you'll let me call you Mama? Jacob pressed, needing confirmation. Emma reached across the table and took his small hand in hers. If that feels right to you, then yes, I'd be honored. Jacob beamed, satisfied, and returned to his dinner as though he hadn't just fundamentally redefined the family structure. But Emma noticed Owen watching her thoughtfully, and Lily's expression shifting from grief to something that might have been tentative acceptance. That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Emma stood at the kitchen window watching snow fall in the darkness. She heard Nathan's footsteps behind her but didn't turn. You're allowed to be overwhelmed, he said quietly, coming to stand beside her. That was a lot, what Jake said. I'm not overwhelmed, Emma searched for the right word. Humbled, maybe. Terrified of not being enough. Grateful beyond words. You're more than enough. Nathan paused, and when Emma glanced at him, she saw him struggling with words that didn't come easily. When I bought you from your uncle, I thought I was solving a problem. Getting help I desperately needed. But you've become... He stopped, started again. You've become essential. Not because of what you do, but because of who you are. And I know we haven't talked about the future, about what we are to each other beyond this undefined thing we're building. But I want you to know that you're not just staying here until something better comes along. This is your home for as long as you want it. Emma turned to face him fully. What are you saying, Nathan? I'm saying I'd like to make this permanent, legal. Not because of convenience or necessity, but because... He took a breath. Because I'm falling in love with you, Emma Hale. Slowly and terrified, and probably not in any way that resembles romance, but truly. And I'd like to marry you proper, if you'll have me. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. You're falling in love with me? Is that so surprising? Yes, she admitted. I thought maybe you tolerated me, maybe appreciated me. But love, I know I'm not good at showing it. I know I retreat and I'm emotionally stunted and I'm damaged in ways that probably aren't fixable. But you make me want to try to be better. You make this house feel like home again instead of just a place where we survive. And watching you with my children, his voice roughened, watching them bloom under your care, seeing them happy again, knowing it's because of you. How could I not love you for that alone? Never mind everything else you are? Emma realized she was crying, tears sliding hot down her cold cheeks. I didn't think you saw me. Not really. I thought I was still just convenient. You were never just convenient. Nathan reached up and wiped her tears with his thumb, his touch gentle. From the first night when you slept in Sarah's nightgown, and I heard you crying through the wall, I knew you were a person carrying her own grief and trying to make space for ours. You were never just a tool. I was just too afraid to admit you'd become important. I love you too, Emma whispered, the words tumbling out before she could second-guess them. I've been trying not to. Trying to protect myself from caring too much about someone who might never care back. But I love you, Nathan. And I love your children. And yes, I'll marry you. Not because I need security or because it's practical, but because this has become my family, and I want to make it official. Nathan pulled her into his arms then, holding her tight enough that she could feel his heart pounding against her own. They stood that way for a long time, two damaged people who'd found each other through transaction, but had chosen each other through love, neither speaking because words seemed insufficient for the enormity of what they'd just confessed. Finally, Nathan pulled back enough to look at her face. I don't have a ring, and I can't promise you an easy life. Ranch work is hard, winters are brutal, and my children come with complications and needs. Nathan, Emma interrupted, smiling despite her tears. I walked into a snowstorm because I thought I didn't matter. You came after me. You've given me a home and a family and a purpose. I don't need a ring or promises of ease. I just need this, us, messy and imperfect, and figuring it out as we go. He kissed her then, gentle and reverent, and Emma tasted salt from both their tears and thought that nothing in her life had ever felt more right than this moment, this man, this family she'd been bought into but had chosen to stay in. When they finally separated, both of them shaking slightly, Nathan said, We should tell the children tomorrow. They should know we're making this permanent. They'll be happy, I think. At least Jake and Owen will be. Lily might need more time to adjust to the idea. Lily's stronger than she looks, and she cares about you even when she's protecting herself from caring too much. He tucked a strand of Emma's hair behind her ear. We'll tell them together, as a family, the way everything should be from now on. Emma nodded, peace settling over her like the snow settling over the valley outside. She'd been sold for $60 and a sack of grain, traded away by family who saw her as a burden. But she'd found her way to people who saw her as essential, who loved her not for what she could do, but for who she was. And tomorrow they'd make it official, this ragged, beautiful family they'd stitched together from grief and need and finally, choice. The snow continued falling outside, but inside the house was warm, and Emma was home in ways she'd never been home before. The future stretched ahead, uncertain and surely difficult, but they'd face it together now, not as employer and employee, not as purchased convenience and desperate widower, but as partners choosing love despite fear, choosing family despite loss, choosing hope despite every reason winter had given them to surrender to cold. Morning arrived with the particular clarity that follows snow, the world outside scrubbed clean and gleaming under pale sunlight. Emma woke earlier than usual, her body humming with nervous energy from the previous night's confessions. Nathan loved her. She loved him. They were going to marry, make permanent what had begun as transaction. The reality of it felt both inevitable and impossibly fragile, as though speaking it aloud might somehow break the spell. She dressed carefully in the warmest of her borrowed dresses. Sarah's dresses, she reminded herself, though the thought no longer carried the sharp edge of intrusion it once had. Sarah would want her clothes worn, her house maintained, her children loved. Emma was beginning to understand that honoring the dead didn't require keeping everything frozen in time, but rather allowing life to continue in ways that would have made them proud. When she entered the kitchen, Nathan was already there, feeding wood into the stove with methodical precision. He looked up at her approach, and something in his expression made Emma's breath catch. Vulnerability mixed with determination, fear mixed with hope. They'd crossed a threshold last night that couldn't be uncrossed, and both of them knew it. "Morning," he said quietly, his voice carrying the roughness of a man who hadn't slept much. "Morning." Emma moved to the pump, began filling the kettle for coffee. "Did you sleep at all?" "Some. Kept thinking about how to tell the children. Kept worrying I'd say it wrong, or they'd—" He stopped, shook his head. "I'm not good at this. At big moments that require the right words." "Then we'll use simple words," Emma said, setting the kettle on the stove. "We'll tell them the truth, that we care about each other, that we want to make this family official, that nothing has to change except maybe everything will be a little more secure, a little more certain." "When you say it, it sounds simple." "It is simple. We're just afraid it isn't." She moved to him, placed her hand over his on the stove poker. "Nathan, they already see us as a family. Jake calls me Mama. Lily trusts me with her grief. Owen asked me to teach him. We're not announcing something new, we're just naming what already exists." He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through hers. "You're right. You're always right about things like this." "Not always, but I'm right about us." They stood that way until they heard footsteps on the stairs. Lily descending, her movements careful as always, conscious of waking her brothers too early. She stopped when she saw her father and Emma standing close, hands linked, and something shifted in her young face. "Did something happen?" she asked, wariness creeping into her tone. "Come sit," Nathan said, releasing Emma's hand but staying close. "We need to talk with you, with all of you, once your brothers wake." Lily's eyes widened. "Is someone sick? Did something happen with the ranch?" "No, nothing like that. It's good news, actually, or we hope you'll think it's good news." Nathan was already fumbling the words. Emma could see, panic making him clumsy. She stepped in gently. "Your father and I have decided to get married," Emma said simply. "We wanted you children to know first, before we made any formal plans." Lily stood frozen, her face cycling through emotions too quickly to name. Shock, followed by something that might have been hurt, then confusion, then careful blankness as her walls came up. "Married," she repeated, the word flat. "Yes," Nathan said. Emma's become part of this family, and we want to make it official, permanent." "You're replacing Mama." Lily's voice was still flat, but Emma heard the pain beneath. "That's what this is. You're replacing her." "No," Emma said firmly, moving toward the girl. "Your mother can't be replaced. She was a specific person who loved you in specific ways only she could. But she's gone, Lily, and life goes on. Your father and I, we found something together. It's not the same as what he had with your mother. It's its own thing. Can you understand that?" "I understand Papa promised to love Mama forever. I remember the wedding vows. I was there. Until death do us part." Well, death parted them. But forever should mean forever. Tears were streaming down Lily's face now, her composure cracking. "How can he just move on like she didn't matter?" Nathan flinched as though struck. "Your mama mattered more than anything. Losing her nearly destroyed me. But I'm still alive, Lily, and so are you and your brothers. And Emma," his voice roughened. "Emma's made it possible for us to do more than just survive. She's made this house feel like a home again. That's not betraying your mother's memory. That's honoring her by making sure her children are happy and cared for." "Mama would want you to be happy, wouldn't she?" Emma asked gently. "She wouldn't want you to stay frozen in grief forever." Lily's shoulders shook with sobs she was trying to suppress. "I just miss her so much. And if Papa marries you, it's like admitting she's really gone and never coming back. As long as it was just us, I could pretend sometimes that she was just away, that she might—" She broke off, recognizing the futility of her own words. "I know that's childish." "It's not childish. It's human." Emma pulled Lily into an embrace, feeling the girl's rigid body gradually soften. "And you're allowed to miss her. You're allowed to be sad about this. You're allowed to need time to adjust. But I need you to know something. I'm not trying to take your mother's place in your heart. I'm just trying to be here for you and your brothers, that's all." "Do you love Papa?" Lily asked, her voice muffled against Emma's shoulder. "Yes." "And does he love you?" "He says he does." Lily pulled back, swiping at her eyes. "Mama always said love was something you chose, not just something you felt. She said feelings came and went, but choosing to love someone every day, that was what mattered." She looked at her father. "Is that what you're doing? Choosing to love Emma?" "Yes," Nathan said without hesitation. "Every day. Even on the days when it scares me, especially on those days." Lily absorbed this, her young face thoughtful. "I don't know if I'm ready to be happy about this. I don't know if I can be." "You don't have to be happy about it," Emma said. "You just have to be honest about how you feel, and we'll work through it together." The sound of footsteps on the stairs announced Owen and Jacob's arrival. Both boys rumpled from sleep, Jacob's wooden horse trailing from one hand. They stopped when they saw Lily's tear-streaked face. "What's wrong?" Owen asked immediately, moving to his sister. "Papa and Emma are getting married," Lily said, her voice steadier now. "They wanted us to know." Jacob's face lit up with uncomplicated joy. "You're going to be married like in the stories? With a wedding and everything?" "Eventually, yes," Nathan said, his expression softening as he looked at his youngest. "We wanted to tell you children first, make sure you were comfortable with it." "But Emma's already our mama," Jacob said, confused. "Why do you need a wedding?" "To make it official," Owen explained, though his eyes were on his father's face, searching for something Emma couldn't quite identify. So nobody can question that we're a real family. We're already a real family, Jacob insisted. We are, Emma agreed. But your father and I want to make promises to each other in front of everyone, to commit to each other and to all of you, formally. Owen was quiet for a long moment. Then he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around Emma's waist, pressing his face against her shoulder. I'm glad, he said quietly. I'm glad you're staying forever. I was afraid you might leave when things got hard. Emma's throat tightened. I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart. This is my home now. Ours, Jacob corrected, tugging on her skirt. Our home. All of us together. Nathan cleared his throat roughly, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. I think we should have breakfast, he said, his voice not quite steady. And then Emma and I need to ride into town, make arrangements. Lily, can you manage things here with your brothers? Yes, Papa. Lily's voice was still subdued, but she met Emma's eyes with something like tentative acceptance. I'll manage. They ate quickly, the meal punctuated by Jacob's excited chatter about what a wedding might involve, and Owen's more practical questions about timing and logistics. Lily remained quiet but present, occasionally glancing at Emma with an expression that held equal parts grief and cautious hope. Emma understood. The girl was trying to reconcile love for her dead mother with acceptance of this new woman in their lives, trying to figure out how to move forward without feeling like she was betraying the past. After breakfast, Emma changed into her warmest clothes and met Nathan by the wagon. The morning was cold but clear, perfect for the journey into town. As they pulled out of the yard, Emma looked back at the house and saw all three children watching from the window. Lily holding Jacob's hand, Owen standing slightly apart, all of them waving goodbye. They'll be all right, Nathan said, following her gaze. Lily just needs time to adjust. She's been the woman of the house for so long. Accepting someone else in that role feels like surrendering control. I know. I don't want to take her role from her. I just want to share it. She'll come to understand that. Nathan guided the horses onto the main path, his movements automatic from years of practice. Emma, about the wedding, I know you probably had dreams of how that day would look someday. Pretty dress, flowers, music. I can't give you all of that. The best I can offer is the preacher, a few witnesses, maybe dinner afterward at the hotel. Nathan, I don't need elaborate. I just need honest. She reached over and squeezed his hand. The day I marry you, I'm gaining a family and making permanent the home I've found. That's worth more than all the flowers and fancy dresses in the world. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, rough and gentle at once. How did I get this lucky? Finding you when I wasn't even looking for love, just help? Maybe we found each other. Maybe that's how it works when you're ready, even if you don't know you're ready. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the landscape rolling past in endless white punctuated by dark stands of pine. Emma found herself memorizing details, the way morning light caught on snow, the particular sound of wagon wheels on frozen earth, the solid warmth of Nathan beside her. These would be her memories of the day she rode into town to arrange her wedding, simple and perfect in their ordinariness. Town was busier than Emma expected for a cold March morning. Ranchers stocking up on supplies before the next storm, women gathering at the general store to trade news and gossip, children darting between buildings in improvised games. Nathan helped Emma down from the wagon, and they stood for a moment at the edge of the main street, both suddenly hesitant. First stop should be the church, Nathan said. Talk to Reverend Matthews about conducting the ceremony. They found the Reverend in his small office behind the church, bent over ledgers with reading glasses perched on his nose. He looked up when they entered, surprise crossing his weathered face. Nathan Cole, as I live and breathe. Haven't seen you in church for months. Starting to think you'd gone heathen on me. His eyes shifted to Emma with open curiosity. And this must be the young woman you took in. Emma, is it? Yes, sir. Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks under his scrutiny. We'd like to get married, Nathan said bluntly, never one for social niceties. Soon as possible. Just a simple ceremony, nothing fancy. Reverend Matthews set down his pen and leaned back in his chair, studying them both with eyes that had seen too many rushed marriages to be entirely approving. I see. And how long have you two been courting? We're not courting, Nathan said. Emma's been helping with my household since January. We've decided to make the arrangement permanent. An arrangement. The Reverend's tone suggested he'd heard this story before and didn't much like how it usually ended. Son, marriage is a sacred covenant, not a business transaction. Are you both entering this freely with full understanding of what you're promising? Yes, Emma said firmly before Nathan could respond. I know what some people think, that I'm a desperate woman taking what she can get, or that Nathan's just trying to get free labor bound by law. But that's not what this is. We've built something real these last months. We care about each other and about his children. This isn't convenience, Reverend. It's commitment. The old man's expression softened slightly. Well spoken. And you, Nathan? You've had time to grieve your Sarah? You're not rushing into this to avoid feeling what needs to be felt? Nathan was quiet for a long moment, and Emma held her breath, hoping he wouldn't retreat into the emotional distance that had defined him for so long. But when he spoke, his voice was clear and certain. I'll never stop grieving Sarah. She was my first love, the mother of my children, and I'll carry her memory until I die. But Emma's right. We've built something real. She's made my children smile again. She's made me remember there's more to life than just getting through each day. I love her, Reverend, not the same way I loved Sarah, but just as truly. And I want to marry her because she deserves that security and because I want to spend whatever time I have left making her happy. Emma felt tears prick her eyes at the simple honesty of his words. The Reverend seemed equally moved, clearing his throat gruffly. All right then. I'll marry you. When were you thinking? 2 weeks from this Sunday, Nathan said. That gives us time to prepare. Tell people who need to know. Will that work? That works. Come by the church after service that day. Bring witnesses. I assume you'll want your children present. Yes, and maybe a few neighbors. Nothing large. They made the arrangements quickly. Time, date, what readings Nathan wanted included. The Reverend seemed satisfied that this was a genuine marriage rather than mere convenience. And by the time they left the church, some of Emma's nervousness had eased. They'd taken the first official step. In 2 weeks, she'd be Emma Cole, legally and permanently part of this family she'd grown to love. Their next stop was the general store, where Nathan wanted to buy Emma fabric for a new dress. She protested that her borrowed clothes were fine, but he was adamant. You should have something that's yours, he said. Something you chose that fits you proper. Consider it an early wedding gift. The store was crowded with women examining bolts of cloth and trading gossip. Emma noticed how conversations faltered when she and Nathan entered, how eyes tracked their movements with open curiosity. The whispers started almost immediately. That's the girl George Hale sold to Nathan Cole, isn't it? Bought her like livestock, I heard. $60. Wonder what he's doing bringing her to town in broad daylight. Usually keeps his shame hidden at the ranch. Emma's cheeks burned, but Nathan's hand found the small of her back, steady and reassuring. He guided her to the fabric section and ignored the whispers as though they didn't exist. What about this? He asked, pulling out a bolt of deep blue wool. It matches your eyes. It's beautiful, but Nathan, the cost... Let me worry about cost. You worry about whether you like it. Emma ran her fingers over the fabric, feeling its quality. It was finer than anything she'd owned since before her mother died, soft and rich and perfect for a winter wedding. I love it, she admitted. Then we'll take enough for a dress and a warm cloak. Nathan signaled the shopkeeper, who approached with visible reluctance, clearly uncomfortable with whatever gossip he'd been hearing. Help you, Mr. Cole? 6 yards of this blue wool and matching thread. And while you're measuring, spread the word. Emma and I are getting married 2 weeks from Sunday at the church. Anyone who wants to offer congratulations rather than gossip is welcome to attend. The shopkeeper's eyes widened. Married? Well, congratulations then. I'll get this cut for you right away. The whispers intensified as word spread through the store. Emma kept her head high, refusing to show how the gossip stung, but she was grateful for Nathan's solid presence beside her. Some of the women's expressions shifted from judgment to speculation to cautious approval. Apparently, a legal marriage elevated her status from scandalous purchase to respectable union. While the fabric was being cut and wrapped, Nathan pulled Emma aside to a quieter corner of the store. I should have warned you it might be like this. Small towns thrive on gossip, and we gave them plenty to talk about. I can handle gossip, Emma said, though her hands were trembling slightly. I just hate that it reflects on your children. That people think poorly of you because of choices you made when you were desperate. People will think what they think, but once we're married proper, most of the talk will die down, and anyone who has a problem with you will answer to me. They completed their purchases, fabric, thread, a few supplies Nathan needed for the ranch, and were preparing to leave when a woman's voice called out from behind them. Nathan Cole, is that really you? They turned to find a well-dressed woman in her 40s, her face familiar, though Emma couldn't place it. Nathan's expression shifted to something between pleasure and discomfort. Mrs. Henderson, good to see you. And you, it's been too long since you've come to town. Her sharp eyes assessed Emma with frank curiosity. And who is this? This is Emma Hale. She's been helping with my household since January. Emma, this is Martha Henderson. She and her husband own the ranch adjacent to mine. She was a good friend to Sarah. The woman's expression softened at Sarah's name, then sharpened again as she looked between them. I heard rumors you'd taken someone in, caused quite a stir, as I'm sure you know. She paused delicately. Are the rumors true? That you bought her from her uncle? They're true, Nathan said without flinching. I needed help desperately, and Emma needed a home. It was a business arrangement that became something more. We're getting married in 2 weeks. Martha Henderson's eyebrows rose nearly to her hairline. Married? Well, that certainly changes things. She studied Emma more carefully now, seeming to take her measure. Sarah would be glad you're not alone anymore, Nathan. She worried terribly about what would happen to you and the children if something happened to her. Seems she was right to worry, but wrong about you giving up entirely. She extended her hand to Emma. Welcome to the territory, my dear. Marriage to a rancher isn't easy, but if you've survived a Wyoming winter already, you've got the grit for it. Emma shook her hand, surprised by the warmth. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. Call me Martha. We're neighbors, after all, and soon to be family of a sort. She glanced at Nathan. You'll bring her to the spring gathering, I hope. The women are always eager to meet someone new, and Emma should know who she can count on when times get hard. We'll see, Nathan said non-committally, clearly uncomfortable with the social expectations. But Emma noticed Martha's eyes held genuine kindness, and she found herself grateful for this unexpected ally. They said their goodbyes and headed back to the wagon, Emma carrying her wrapped fabric like precious cargo. The sun was high now, warming the air fractionally, and Emma felt some of the tension from the morning's encounters begin to ease. She seemed nice, Emma ventured as they drove out of town. Martha Henderson. She is. Her and Sarah were close. Martha helped when the children were born, came over after Sarah died to help me through the worst of it. I probably should have stayed in better touch, but he trailed off, and Emma understood. Maintaining connections required emotional energy he hadn't possessed. Maybe we can change that. Build some connections outside just the 5 of us. Maybe. Nathan was quiet for a moment, then said, I want to stop somewhere before we go home. There's something I need to do. He guided the wagon off the main path, following a smaller trail that led to a gentle rise overlooking the valley. At the top sat a small cemetery, its wooden crosses and simple stone markers standing sentinel over the territory's dead. Nathan brought the horses to a stop and sat staring at one grave in particular, his face unreadable. Sarah's buried here, he said quietly. I haven't visited since we laid her to rest. Couldn't bear it. But I think I need to now. Before we marry. Need to... He struggled for words. Need to say goodbye proper. Tell her about you, about the children. Make peace with moving forward. Emma's throat tightened. Do you want me to come with you or wait here? Come with me. Please. I want her to know... He stopped, shook his head. I don't know what I want her to know. Maybe that I tried to honor her by taking care of our children, that I didn't give up even when I wanted to, that I found someone who loves them almost as much as she did. They walked together through the cemetery, Nathan leading Emma to a grave marked by a simple wooden cross bearing Sarah's name and the years of her too short life. Someone, probably Nathan in those first raw months, had planted wildflowers around the base, though they were dormant now beneath the snow. Nathan stood silently for a long time, his hat clutched in his hands, his face working through emotions. Emma stayed close but didn't touch him, understanding this was a private grief that predated her arrival and deserved its space. Finally, Nathan spoke, his voice rough and low. "Sarah, I know you can't hear me. I know you're gone, and nothing I say changes that. But I need to tell you some things anyway, even if it's just for me." He paused, gathering himself. "I tried to keep going after you died. Tried to be strong for the children, keep the ranch running, do everything you would have wanted. But I was barely surviving, and the children were suffering for it. Lily grew up too fast, Owen stopped dreaming, and Jacob—" His voice broke. Jacob stopped talking entirely. "I failed them, Sarah. I failed you." Emma's heart ached watching him struggle with guilt he'd been carrying for 2 years. "But then Emma came," Nathan continued, "and she started putting us back together, piece by piece. She got Jacob talking again. She's teaching Owen and helping Lily remember she's still a child. She's made our house feel like a home again, instead of a tomb we're all trapped in." He paused, tears streaming down his face now. "I love her, Sarah. Not the same way I loved you. You were my first everything, and I'll never stop being grateful for the years we had. But Emma's become precious to me, and I need to know—" His voice caught. "I need to know it's all right. That loving her doesn't mean I'm betraying you." The wind picked up, rustling through bare branches, and Emma could almost imagine it was Sarah answering, giving her blessing. Nathan seemed to feel it too, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "I'm going to marry her in 2 weeks," he said, his voice steadier. "Make her part of our family official. The children need her, and so do I. But I want you to know you'll always be their mother. I'll make sure they remember you, that they know how much you loved them. Emma understands that. She's not trying to erase you." He paused one last time. "Thank you for the years we had. Thank you for our children. And please, if there's any way, watch over us. All of us. We're going to be all right, but we could still use your guidance." He stood for another moment, then bent and brushed snow from the base of the cross with gentle hands. When he straightened, his eyes were red but clearer somehow, as though a weight he'd been carrying had finally been acknowledged and partially released. Emma took his hand when he rejoined her, and they walked back to the wagon in silence. As they climbed onto the seat and Nathan guided the horses back toward the main path, Emma finally spoke. "That was brave. What you did. It was necessary. I couldn't move forward properly while still holding on so tight to the past." He glanced at her, his expression raw but honest. "I meant what I said to her. You're precious to me. I want our marriage to be real, not a convenience or an arrangement, but a partnership built on love and respect. That's what I want too." They rode home through the afternoon, the sun slanting long across the snow, both of them quiet but comfortable in their silence. When they crested the final ridge and saw the ranch spread below them, smoke rising from the chimney, horses moving in the corral, and 3 small figures running out to greet them, Emma felt peace settle over her like a warm blanket. This was home. This was family, and in 2 weeks it would all be official, bound by vows spoken before community and whatever higher power watched over desperate people finding their way toward hope. The children surrounded the wagon as Nathan brought it to a stop, all of them talking at once about their day. Lily had made bread that turned out perfectly. Owen had seen a hawk hunting near the creek. Jacob had built an entire village with his blocks and wanted Emma to see it before dinner. Emma descended into their noise and excitement, letting it wash over her, and caught Nathan's eye across the chaos. He smiled at her, really smiled, open and genuine and full of promise, and Emma smiled back, understanding that whatever challenges lay ahead, they'd face them together. That night, after dinner and chores and children tucked into bed, Emma sat at the kitchen table with her new fabric spread before her, beginning to plan the dress she'd wear when she became Emma Cole. Nathan sat across from her, mending harness leather, occasionally looking up to watch her work. Neither spoke much, but the silence was full of shared understanding, of plans being woven and futures being chosen. 2 weeks, Emma thought, running her fingers over the soft blue wool. 2 weeks until she stood before a preacher and made promises that would bind her to this man and these children forever. 2 weeks until the girl sold for $60 became the woman who chose love, despite every reason to protect her heart. It seemed both impossibly far away and terrifyingly close. But Emma was ready. After 18 years of being unwanted and 7 years of being a burden, she was finally ready to be chosen, to belong, to matter in ways that transcended transaction. She looked up and found Nathan watching her, his eyes soft in the lamplight. 2 weeks, she said, and he nodded. 2 weeks, he agreed. And then forever. Emma smiled, folded her fabric carefully, and carried it to her small room where she'd sleep alone for 14 more nights. After that, everything would change. After that, she'd be home in every sense of the word, bound by law and love to the family she'd found in the frozen heart of winter. The 2 weeks before the wedding passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Emma worked on her dress in the evenings after the children were asleep, her stitches small and careful, each one a promise she was making to herself as much as to Nathan. The blue wool took shape gradually, simple lines suited to ranch life, but beautiful in their simplicity, with small details that showed the care she was putting into this garment that would mark her transformation from purchased help to chosen wife. Lily watched her work sometimes, sitting nearby with her own mending, saying little but present in a way that felt like acceptance even if the words hadn't quite been spoken. One evening, as Emma struggled with the collar, Lily set down her own work and moved to Emma's side. "Mama taught me a stitch that works better for curves," she said quietly. "Would you like me to show you?" Emma's hands stilled. This was an offering, she understood, a bridge being built between past and future, between the mother who'd taught these skills and the woman learning to honor them. "I'd like that very much." Lily demonstrated the stitch, her young hands moving with competence beyond her years, and Emma followed her guidance. They worked in companionable silence for a while before Lily spoke again. "I've been thinking about what you said, about Mama not being replaced, just about there being room for more people to love us." She paused, her needle stilling. "I think I've been so scared of forgetting her that I couldn't let anyone else in. Like if I loved you, it would mean I didn't love her anymore." "But that's not how love works," Emma said gently. "No, I'm starting to understand that." Lily looked up, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I'll never call you Mama like Jacob does. That name belongs to Sarah Cole, and I remember her too well to give it away. But I can call you Emma and still love you. Can that be enough?" Emma set down her sewing and pulled Lily into an embrace. "That's more than enough. That's everything." The girl clung to her for a long moment, and Emma felt something fundamental shift between them. The last wall coming down, the last resistance melting into acceptance. When Lily pulled back, she was smiling through her tears. "Your collar's going to be beautiful," she said, returning to practical matters the way she always did when emotions threatened to overwhelm her. "And I think you should add some embroidery at the cuffs. Just small, but it'll make the dress special. Will you help me with it?" "Yes." "I'd like that." They worked together until the lamp oil ran low, Lily teaching Emma the delicate embroidery stitches her mother had taught her, the two of them stitching connection alongside thread, building something new while honoring what had come before. The night before the wedding, Emma barely slept. She lay in her small room listening to the house settle around her, aware that this was the last night she'd sleep alone, the last night before everything changed irrevocably. Fear and excitement warred in her chest, making her breath come short and her heart race. Tomorrow she'd stand before a preacher and promise forever to a man she'd known less than 3 months, bind herself legally to children who weren't hers by blood, but had become hers by choice. Was she ready? The question circled her mind endlessly. She thought of her mother, dead 7 years, wondered what advice she would give. Probably something practical about making the best of circumstances, about finding grace in unlikely places. Emma wished desperately she could ask, could hear her mother's voice one more time, telling her she was doing the right thing, that love found in winter was still love, that families stitched together from grief and need could still be whole. But her mother was gone, and Emma had only herself to rely on. She rose before dawn, too restless to pretend sleep, and moved quietly through the dark house to the kitchen. To her surprise, she found Nathan already there, sitting at the table with cold coffee, staring at nothing. Couldn't sleep either? Emma asked softly. He looked up, startled, then offered a rueful smile. Kept thinking about everything that could go wrong. What if I'm not a good enough husband? What if I fail you the way I failed Sarah by not being able to save her? What if… Nathan. Emma moved to him, placed her hands on his shoulders. You're going to be a wonderful husband because you're already a wonderful father and partner. Yes, things will go wrong sometimes. That's life. But we'll face them together. That's what marriage means. You're not scared? Terrified, Emma admitted. But I'm also certain. We're choosing each other, Nathan. That's worth being scared for. He pulled her down onto his lap, wrapped his arms around her, and they sat that way in the pre-dawn darkness, drawing strength from each other's presence. When the first light began to color the eastern sky, they separated reluctantly and began the day that would change everything. The children woke excited and nervous, their energy filling the house with barely contained chaos. Jacob insisted on wearing his best clothes, even though the wedding wasn't until afternoon, and had to be convinced to change back into everyday wear for morning chores. Owen asked 100 questions about wedding traditions and legal requirements, his scholar's mind needing to understand every detail. And Lily moved through the morning with unusual quietness, helping Emma with her hair and dress when the time came, her touch gentle and careful. You look beautiful, Lily said when Emma was finally ready, standing before the small mirror in her room. The blue dress fit perfectly, the embroidery at the cuffs catching the light, her hair pinned up in a style Lily had shown her. Papa's going to forget how to breathe when he sees you. Emma laughed despite her nerves. I don't know about that. I do. I've seen how he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching, like you're something precious he's afraid to break. Lily paused, then added quietly, Mama used to say Papa looked at her that same way, especially after we children were born, like he couldn't believe his good fortune. I hope I can make him half as happy as your mother did. You already do, in different ways maybe, but just as real. Lily squeezed Emma's hand. I'm glad you're becoming our family officially. I'm glad Papa won't be alone anymore. They embraced briefly, then Lily went to finish getting her brothers ready, while Emma took a few moments alone to compose herself. She looked at her reflection and barely recognized the woman staring back, no longer the unwanted niece traded away for $60, but someone loved and chosen, about to promise forever to a man who'd somehow become essential in the span of a winter. The ride to town passed too quickly and not quickly enough. Nathan drove the wagon with careful attention, dressed in his best suit that he'd clearly had cleaned for the occasion. The children sat in the back, Jacob chattering excitedly about weddings and celebrations, Owen reading quietly from a book of poetry he'd found, Lily watching the landscape pass with thoughtful eyes. When they reached the church, several wagons were already there. Martha Henderson had apparently spread word of the ceremony, and curious neighbors had come to witness the rancher and his purchased help, making their arrangement respectable. Emma felt a moment of panic at the sight of the gathering, but Nathan's hand found hers and squeezed. Just you and me, he murmured. Everyone else is just decoration. Reverend Matthews met them at the church door, his weathered face kind. Ready? He asked, and when they both nodded, he gestured them inside. The ceremony itself was simple and brief. Nathan and Emma stood before the altar with the children arranged around them. Lily to Emma's right, Owen and Jacob flanking their father. The Reverend spoke about covenant and commitment, about choosing to love even when love was difficult, about building families from whatever materials were available and trusting that grace could make them whole. When it came time for vows, Nathan's voice was steady and clear. I, Nathan Cole, take you, Emma Hale, to be my wife. I promise to provide for you, protect you, honor you, and love you for all the days we're given. I promise to be faithful in plenty and in want, in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health. You've made my house a home again, made my children smile again, made me remember that living is more than surviving. For that and for who you are, I'm grateful. I choose you today and will choose you every day after. Emma's eyes filled with tears as she spoke her own vows. I, Emma Hale, take you, Nathan Cole, to be my husband. I promise to stand with you through whatever comes, to care for your children as my own, to build a life with you based on honesty and love. You gave me a home when I had none, a family when I was alone, a purpose when I felt worthless. You chose to see me as a person when others saw me as convenient. I choose you today and will choose you every day after." The Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, and when Nathan kissed Emma, gentle and reverent and full of promise, she heard Jacob cheer and Owen clap and Lily sniffle back tears. The small congregation offered polite applause, and just like that, Emma Hale became Emma Cole, legally and permanently bound to this family that had become her whole world. Martha Henderson insisted they come to the hotel for a celebratory dinner, and the small party moved through town to the dining room Martha had reserved. It was more elaborate than Emma had expected. Roasted chicken and potatoes, fresh bread, even a small cake Martha had commissioned from the baker. The children ate with good appetite, Jacob regaling anyone who would listen with detailed descriptions of the ceremony, while Owen and Lily sat quietly content. Emma found herself surrounded by ranchers' wives offering advice and welcome, their earlier gossip replaced by genuine friendliness now that she was respectably married. She accepted their well wishes graciously, aware that this was part of integrating into the community, building the connections that would sustain them through hard times ahead. As the afternoon wore into evening, Nathan leaned close and whispered, "Ready to go home, Mrs. Cole?" The name sent a thrill through Emma. "Yes, I think so." They gathered the children and made their goodbyes, accepting final congratulations and promises to visit. The wagon ride home was quieter than the morning journey, all of them tired from the excitement and emotion of the day. Jacob fell asleep against Lily's shoulder, and Owen's head drooped as exhaustion claimed him. When they reached the ranch, Nathan carried Jacob inside while the others stumbled in, half asleep. Emma helped Lily get the boys into bed, then retreated to what had been her small room to change out of her wedding dress. But when she emerged, Nathan was waiting in the hallway. "Your things," he said quietly. "I moved them to our room while we were gone. If that's all right, if you'd rather keep separate rooms until—" "No," Emma interrupted. "I'm your wife now. We're partners in everything." He led her to the bedroom he'd shared with Sarah, and Emma felt a moment of hesitation at the threshold. But the room had been changed. New quilts on the bed, fresh curtains at the window, small touches that showed Nathan had tried to make it theirs rather than his and Sarah's. Emma was grateful for his thoughtfulness, for understanding that she needed to build something new rather than simply inhabit what had been. They stood awkwardly for a moment, both suddenly shy despite the intimacy they'd been building for months. Finally, Nathan cleared his throat. "I know this is all happening fast. We don't have to— if you need time to adjust to being married before we—" He was fumbling, clearly uncomfortable, and Emma took pity on him. "Nathan, I chose this. I chose you. I'm not afraid." She moved closer, placed her hand on his chest where she could feel his heart hammering. "We'll figure this out like we've figured everything else out, together." He gathered her close then, and they found their way to each other with tenderness and patience, learning the language of marriage one hesitant touch at a time. It wasn't perfect or smooth, but it was real and honest and full of promise for all the nights to come. Later, lying in the darkness with Nathan's arm around her and his breath evening into sleep, Emma stared at the ceiling and marveled at how completely her life had transformed. 3 months ago, she'd been a burden in her uncle's house. Now she was a wife and mother, legally bound to people who loved her, building a future she'd stopped believing was possible. Spring came early that year, snow melting into rushing creeks and muddy earth, the world transforming from white to green with startling speed. The ranch work intensified, calving season bringing sleepless nights, fences needing repair after winter's damage, fields requiring preparation for planting. Emma threw herself into the work alongside Nathan and the children, learning the rhythms of ranch life, accepting both its beauty and its brutal demands. Jacob continued to blossom, his voice growing stronger and more confident each day. He followed Emma everywhere, chattering about horses and birds and the 1,000 wonders of the world he'd been silently observing for 2 years. One morning he announced he wanted to learn to read like Owen, and Emma's heart swelled with joy at his eagerness to engage with life again. Owen received a response to his letter to the Territorial School Board. There was indeed a scholarship program for promising students, and he was invited to take an examination in Cheyenne that summer. Nathan initially resisted the idea, worried about losing Owen's help on the ranch, But Emma gently reminded him that every parent's job was to prepare their children for futures beyond what they themselves could provide. "He's brilliant, Nathan," Emma said one evening as they watched Owen absorbed in another book. "He deserves the chance to see how far that brilliance can take him. We can manage the ranch without him if we need to." Nathan struggled with it, Emma knew. The idea of his son leaving, even for education, triggered fears of loss he'd never fully conquered. But eventually he agreed to let Owen take the examination, and the boys' joy at the news was reward enough for any sacrifice they might have to make. Lily gradually shed the adult responsibilities she'd carried too long, allowing herself to be 12 years old again. She laughed more freely, played with Jacob instead of constantly supervising him, even brought home a stray kitten she'd found near the creek and begged to keep. Nathan grumbled about not needing another mouth to feed, but Emma noticed he was the one who built a special bed for the kitten near the stove and ensured it had milk each morning. The family fell into new rhythms, more relaxed than before Emma's arrival, built on foundation of mutual care and honest communication. Disagreement still happened, Nathan retreating into silence when stress overwhelmed him, Lily occasionally testing boundaries to reassert her independence, the boys squabbling over toys or chores. But they faced conflicts together now, talking through problems instead of burying them, trusting that love could survive honest disagreement. It was late April when the crisis came that tested everything they'd built. Nathan and Owen were working the north pasture, checking on new calves, when a commotion near the barn drew Emma from the kitchen. She arrived to find Jacob standing frozen with terror, tears streaming down his face, staring at something behind the woodpile. "Jake, what's wrong?" Emma asked, moving quickly to his side. He pointed with a shaking hand. "Lily," he whispered. "A snake bit Lily." Emma's heart stopped. She ran around the woodpile and found Lily sitting on the ground, her face white with shock, staring at 2 puncture marks on her forearm that were already beginning to swell. A rattlesnake lay dead a few feet away, its head crushed by the piece of firewood Lily still clutched in her other hand. "It was under the wood," Lily said, her voice distant and strange. "I didn't see it until it struck. But I killed it, Emma. I killed it so it couldn't hurt Jake." Emma's mind raced through everything she knew about snake bites. Keep the victim still, get the venom out if possible, prevent panic that would spread poison faster through the bloodstream. She forced herself to breathe steadily, to project calm even as terror clawed at her throat. "You did exactly right," Emma said, kneeling beside Lily. "Now I need you to stay very still and calm for me. Jacob, run to the barn and ring the bell for your papa. Then come right back. Can you do that?" Jacob took off running, and Emma heard the bell clanging moments later. She examined Lily's arm carefully. The swelling was spreading, but not as fast as it could be, suggesting maybe the snake hadn't delivered a full dose of venom, or maybe Lily's quick action in killing it had limited the injection. "I'm scared," Lily whispered, her brave facade cracking. "Am I going to die like Mama?" "No," Emma said fiercely, taking Lily's face in her hands. "You are not going to die. I won't let you. Your papa won't let you. We're going to fight this together, and you're going to survive. Do you hear me?" Lily nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. Jacob returned at a run, throwing himself at Emma's side, and together they waited for Nathan, Emma keeping Lily still and calm, talking to her constantly about anything and everything to keep her from succumbing to the panic that could kill her as surely as the venom. Nathan and Owen appeared at a gallop, Nathan's face going white when he saw Lily's swollen arm. But to his credit, he didn't fall apart. He swung down from his horse and knelt beside his daughter, his hands gentle despite their shaking. "We need to get her to town," he said, his voice tight but controlled. "The doctor there might have anti-venom. Owen, get the wagon ready. Jacob, help your brother. Emma, I'm coming with you," Emma said, brooking no argument. "Lily needs both of us." The ride to town was the longest of Emma's life. Lily lay in the wagon bed with her head on Emma's lap, growing weaker as the venom worked through her system. Emma kept talking to her, kept her conscious, kept her fighting even as Lily's eyes drooped and her breathing grew labored. Nathan drove the horses harder than was safe, and Emma offered no complaint. Getting to the doctor fast was their only chance. They burst into town at full gallop, Nathan shouting for the doctor before the wagon had even stopped. Dr. Morrison came running from his office, took one look at Lily's arm, and barked orders to carry her inside immediately. The next hours were a blur of activity Emma could barely process. The doctor worked over Lily with calm efficiency, administering what anti-venom he had, lancing the wound to drain poison, applying poultices to draw out toxins. Nathan paced like a caged animal, his face ravaged with fear and helplessness. Owen and Jacob huddled together on a bench, watching their sister fight for her life, both boys pale and silent with terror. Emma stayed at Lily's bedside, holding her uninjured hand, talking to her constantly even when Lily seemed too far gone to hear. She told Lily about all the things they'd do together when she recovered, teaching her to make her mother's special berry pie, helping her sew a new dress for summer, maybe getting her a horse of her own to ride. She told Lily how proud Sarah would be of her bravery, how she'd saved Jacob by killing the snake despite her own injury. She told Lily she was loved and needed and essential, that this family couldn't bear to lose her. Nathan eventually came to stand on Lily's other side, his face wet with tears he wasn't bothering to hide. He took his daughter's other hand and added his voice to Emma's, pleading with Lily to stay, to fight, to come back to them. "I can't lose you," Nathan said, his voice breaking. "I can't lose another person I love. You're so strong, Lily girl, stronger than me. You've been holding this family together for 2 years. Now let us hold you. Let us carry you through this, please." Whether their words reached her, or the anti-venom finally began working, or sheer stubborn will kept her tethered to life, Emma would never know. But gradually, slowly, Lily's breathing steadied. The deadly pallor faded from her face. Her eyes flickered open, confused and exhausted, but alive. "Papa?" she whispered. "Emma?" "We're here," Emma said, tears of relief streaming down her face. "We're right here, and you're going to be all right." "Jake? Is Jake safe?" "He's safe," Nathan assured her. "You saved him. You killed the snake before it could hurt him. You were so brave." Lily's eyes drifted closed again, but this time it was exhaustion rather than venom pulling her under. Dr. Morrison checked her vital signs and nodded with satisfaction. "She's turned the corner," he said quietly. "The next 24 hours are critical, but I think she's going to make it. You got her here fast enough, and she's strong. She'll need time to recover. That arm won't be usable for a week or more, and she'll be weak, but she should heal completely." Nathan's knees buckled, and Emma was there to steady him, holding him up while he shook with relief so profound it bordered on collapse. Owen and Jacob crowded close, and for a moment the family simply clung to each other, grateful beyond words that death had been cheated one more time. They stayed in town for 3 days while Lily recovered under the doctor's supervision. Martha Henderson opened her home to them, insisting they use her guest rooms rather than sleep at the hotel or try to make the journey back to the ranch while Lily was still fragile. The kindness of neighbors, some of whom had gossiped cruelly about Emma just months before, humbled her. They brought food and offers of help, sat vigil with the family, proved that community could be genuine when crisis stripped away pretense. When they finally returned home, Lily was still weak but improving daily. Emma set up a bed for her in the main room near the fire so she wouldn't have to climb stairs, and the girl held court from her nest of quilts, accepting her brother's attention with good grace and tolerating her father's constant hovering with patient affection. One evening, about a week after the snakebite, Emma was helping Lily change the dressing on her arm when the girl spoke quietly. "I heard you, when I was so sick. I heard you telling me about all the things we do together, about how I was loved and needed. It's all true," Emma said simply. "I know, and I need you to know." Lily paused, gathering courage. "I need you to know that I love you too. Not the same as I loved Mama, but real and true. You're my family, Emma. You're my—" She struggled for the right word. "You're my chosen mother, the one I picked, even though I didn't know I was picking at first. Does that make sense?" Emma's vision blurred with tears. "That makes perfect sense." "Good." Lily settled back against her pillows, looking more at peace than Emma had ever seen her. "I just wanted you to know, in case something happens again, and I don't get the chance to say it." "Nothing's going to happen," Emma said firmly. "We're all going to live long, boring lives and drive each other slightly crazy and be grateful for every minute of it." Lily laughed, wincing as the movement pulled her injured arm. "I'll hold you to that." As Lily healed, life gradually returned to normal rhythms, though normal now included an even deeper appreciation for each ordinary day. The family had faced death together and emerged intact, and that shared experience bound them more tightly than any legal document or spoken vow. Summer arrived with stunning beauty. Wildflowers carpeting the valleys, new calves growing strong on rich grass, the work hard but satisfying in ways winter's survival struggles never were. Owen traveled to Cheyenne for his examination and returned with news that he'd been accepted to the Territorial Academy with a full scholarship starting in the fall. The pride in Nathan's eyes when he heard warred visibly with grief at the thought of his son leaving, but he embraced Owen and told him how proud he was, and Emma loved him more for the sacrifice she knew that approval cost. It was late July, with harvest approaching and the children helping in the fields, when a wagon appeared on the horizon. Emma shaded her eyes against the sun, watching it approach, and felt her stomach drop when she recognized the driver. Uncle George. Nathan came to stand beside her, following her gaze, and his hand found hers. "What's he doing here?" "I don't know. Nothing good, probably." Emma's voice was steady, but her heart hammered with old fear and newer anger. They waited in the yard as George Hale pulled his wagon to a stop and climbed down, his face showing the lines of hard living and harder drinking. He looked at Emma for a long moment, taking in her sun-darkened skin, her capable hands, the way she stood close to Nathan with easy familiarity. "Emma," he said finally, "you're looking well." "What do you want, George?" Emma made no effort to soften her tone with courtesy she didn't feel. "Can a man visit his niece?" "Not when that man sold her for $60 and hasn't bothered to check if she was alive or dead in 6 months. Nathan's voice was cold, his body positioned slightly in front of Emma's, protective. George's face tightened. "I did what I thought was best. You needed help. I needed—" He stopped, having the grace to look ashamed. "I heard you got married proper. Made it respectable." "It was always respectable," Emma said. "What we've built here is more real than anything your household ever offered me." "I know that. I can see that." George looked down at his worn boots, and when he looked up again, there was something like remorse in his eyes. "Your aunt and I. Things fell apart after you left. She left me, took what little we had. I've been doing poorly, Emma, real poorly, and I came to—" He swallowed hard. "I came to ask forgiveness, and maybe to see if there's any help you could spare for your bloodkin." Emma stared at him, anger and pity warring in her chest. This was the man who'd raised her after her parents died, who'd resented every moment of it, who'd traded her away like livestock the first chance he got. But he was also broken and desperate and human in his failure. "You sold me," Emma said quietly. "You made me feel worthless for 7 years. You took money for a human being and never looked back to see if I survived. Why should I help you now?" "You shouldn't," George admitted. "I got no right to ask. But I'm asking anyway, because I got nowhere else to turn, and because for all my failures, you're still my blood." Emma felt Nathan's hand squeeze hers, offering support regardless of what she decided. She looked back toward the house and saw the children watching from the porch, Jacob holding his wooden horse, Owen with his arm around his younger brother, Lily, standing straight and strong despite the scar on her arm. Her family. The people who'd chosen her and whom she'd chosen back. "I'll give you food and supplies," Emma said finally. "Enough to see you through a few months if you're careful with it. And I'll ask neighbors if anyone has work available. But I won't give you money, and I won't welcome you into our home as though the past didn't happen. You can't undo what you did, Uncle George. You can't take back making me feel like a burden for 7 years." "I know that," George's voice was rough. "And I won't ask for more than you're offering. The food and help finding work, that's more than generous considering—" "It's not generous," Emma corrected. "It's me being a better person than you taught me to be. It's me choosing grace because these people," she gestured toward her family, "taught me I was worth more than I believed. But don't mistake grace for forgiveness. I may forgive you someday, but not today. Today I'm just choosing not to let your failure define who I am." Nathan helped load George's wagon with supplies from their stores: flour, beans, salt pork, enough to keep a man fed if not comfortable. George accepted it with mumbled thanks, looking smaller somehow than Emma remembered, diminished by failure and regret. Before he climbed back onto his wagon, George looked at Emma one last time. "You've done well for yourself, better than I ever imagined you could. Your mama would be proud." "My mama would be ashamed you sold her daughter," Emma replied. "But yes, I've done well. Not because of you, but in spite of you." He nodded slowly, acknowledging the truth of it, then drove away, his wagon disappearing down the path the same way Emma's had that frozen January day when her life changed forever. Emma stood watching until he was out of sight, Nathan's arm around her shoulders, the children gradually moving closer until they surrounded her with their presence and their love. "Are you all right?" Nathan asked quietly. "I'm perfect," Emma said, and meant it. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, with exactly who I'm supposed to be with. He can't touch that. Nothing can." That evening, with dinner finished and the children preparing for bed, Emma stood at the window looking out at the mountains silhouetted against the darkening sky. She felt Nathan come up behind her, his arms encircling her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For choosing grace with your uncle even after everything he did. For being strong enough to help him without letting it diminish you. For being exactly who you are." He paused. "I know I don't say it enough, but I'm grateful every day that your uncle brought you into my life, even if his reasons were mercenary. You've transformed everything. This house, these children, me. I was barely surviving before you came. Now I'm living." Emma turned in his arms to face him. "We're living, all of us together. That's what families do. They transform survival into life, loneliness into belonging, fear into hope." "When did you get so wise?" "When I was sold for $60 and discovered I was worth everything." He kissed her then, deep and sweet. And Emma thought about the journey that had brought her here, from unwanted niece to purchased convenience to chosen wife and mother. Every moment of pain had been worth it to arrive at this place, in this man's arms, part of this family that had stitched itself together from broken pieces and become whole. When they finally separated, they could hear Lily reading to Jacob upstairs, her voice carrying through the floorboards as she brought her brother into worlds of imagination and adventure. Owen's lamp glowed in the window of his room, where he studied late into the night, preparing for the academy that would open new futures. Their family, imperfect and precious and real. "Come to bed, Mrs. Cole," Nathan murmured. "Tomorrow comes early." "Tomorrow always comes early on a ranch," Emma replied with a smile. "But I wouldn't have it any other way." They climbed the stairs together, checked on each child, kissing foreheads, adjusting blankets, murmuring good nights. Then they retired to their own room, the one they'd made theirs through months of building intimacy and trust, and held each other in the darkness while outside the Wyoming night settled over the valley like a benediction. Emma drifted toward sleep, thinking about the girl she'd been and the woman she'd become, about cold transactions that warmed into love, about grief that made space for healing, about families chosen rather than assigned by blood, about $60 that had purchased help but couldn't quantify the worth of a human heart or the value of belonging. She was Emma Cole now, and she was home. Not the home of her childhood that death had stolen, not the reluctant shelter of her uncle's house, but the home she'd claimed through courage and built through love. A home where she mattered, where she was essential, where she would stay for all the days she was given. Spring would come again, and winters would return, bringing their cycles of plenty and want, joy and sorrow, life and death. But Emma would face them surrounded by people who loved her, in a house that had learned to breathe again, building a future she'd once believed was impossible. The last thought before sleep claimed her was simple and profound. She was enough. She had always been enough. It had just taken being sold for $60 to discover she was worth everything. And in the morning, when she woke to Nathan's arms around her and children's voices rising in the house below and sunlight streaming through windows that framed mountains and sky, Emma would rise and greet the new day with gratitude for every hard road that had led her here, to this perfect, imperfect life, to this family born of winter cold and spring thaw, to this love that had survived every reason to surrender to fear. She was home. She was loved. She was Emma Cole. And that was everything.